Well, howdy everybody, and welcome back to the Super Robot Wars R efficiency tier list. We covered S through A before, and sometimes it just feels good to complain a bit. So let's rag on some units and talk about tiers C and D today. With any luck, we will also get to the rest of the sort of extraneous tiers, but C and D are pretty hefty, so I make no promises, let's see. I guess before we get started, to try and save myself some time, this is a part 2, and I don't want to fully recover all of the information I did in the first part, so if you would like to hear my thoughts on tier lists in general, this one in particular, and also the pilots that you see down the right and left sides of your screen, so the Universal Sentry and the After War Gundam X pilots respectively, and why they are listed in this way, you're going to need to go back to the first portion. I make a point in that episode that I think you kind of need the full context to be able to make meaning out of what's happening in this tier list. But, you know, I mean, I can't tell you what to do. Like, I trust you can be intelligent to figure some things out on your own, too. But with that said, there is definitely value to at least watching parts of the first episode if you want to learn more about why the units I think are bad are bad. To that point, speaking of things being bad, I probably will sound somewhat worse than usual. Can't be that much better, but, you know, I am going to try and do this in as few takes as possible, so we're going to leave some more of the, like, ums and uhs and in. I think part A, just to save me time, but part B is I want an attitude that makes it feel like being able to talk about playing a game at its highest level or among its highest levels does not necessarily need to confer, like, a lack of relaxedness, you know? Just because I want to talk about efficiency does not mean there's, like, any amount of moral superiority going on here. It does not make this inherently a more valuable video, right? Like, we can still just be the same casual goobers we always are. So, with that in mind, I said it before and I will say it again, especially because we are in the C and D categories now. Just because I have a unit down here or just because I say negative things about them does not mean I think anyone that uses them is inherently a worse player, that they're less skilled or less thoughtful about the game, or that you should, like, feel bad morally because a character you like is here. I like plenty of the characters that are in these positions. I am trying to approach this game from a level of efficacy and with a want to try and complete the game as fast as possible. I think the slower that you play, the more units start looking like each other, because with more investment, all characters end up having roughly the same stat blocks, seeing as most of their stats are going to overcap what is necessary to defeat enemies and scenarios, you know? So the more starter of elements are going to define their character better, and inherently, anyone can take 99 turns to complete a scenario. But completing a scenario in 5 turns, or 3 turns, or 1 turn is inherently much more difficult. So I want to be able to speak to qualities that are going to be more standout. With that in mind, let's jump into C tier. I am opening C tier with the final 2 excellence units. Despite what I have said about them in Ruining Super Robot Wars R and my playlist, and just making comparisons to them in the past, they need to be in C because A, they are some of the latest units that you get access to. They are not the very last, but they come in, I believe, the second to last or third to last. Let me consult my notes quick. That is... yeah, I want to call that second to last grouping of units. So you just have them for so little of the game that they really can't contribute that much. Additionally, the difference between the Excellence models before the Eternal and the Lightning are much smaller than some of the other upgrades that happen. They're still good, they're still improvements, but a change from something like the Akito Aistavalis and the Black Serena is a lot more dramatic. Being more dramatic does not necessarily improve your placement, right? Like, I still placed Akito. I still placed Akito's initial Aistavalis higher than the Black Serena. But just looking at the stats numerically, there can be a wide change. There could be a much wider change in upgrades as far as this game is concerned. At the very least, the Eternal needs to be worse than the Lightning, because for whatever reason, they didn't change literally anything about the two qualities of the final excellences, despite the fact that their pilots actually have a different stat balance. The Fiona really should have gotten an attack that caters to the fact that she has higher range than melee, seeing as we've made some really silly exceptions for the Mazinger and all of it attacks being melee, despite the fact that some of them are shooting laser beams. Like, what's happening there? And we can't give Fiona a ranged attack for her final. Is just very strange. They also have not the most stand out of parameters. 7 move is good, and 3700 power for a final attack is decent. It does cost them 80 energy. They do have an energy restore small to compensate for it, but it is still on the more expensive side of things. They feel like they are at this point kind of more in the line of trying to take out bosses, and they can do that, but both pilots have the same spirit pool, and they do have access to Valor, so they'll get the job done. But there still needs to be worst among a list of characters whose primary job now is to just defeat bosses. We have a number of those. Killing bosses is a lot harder in this game than it is in many other tactics games. So in a lot of other games, thinking about a boss killer as a role that we need people to fill is much less of a tall order. So make no mistake here, please don't let me mince my words. That is a role, and it is one of higher priority because bosses have just such inflated stats. But we already have a multitude of boss killers, plenty that have already been long established by the point you were getting access to the excellences. Which is not to say that you probably weren't already using some of the other excellence forms, right? Like Fiona or Rao probably have some stats on them. But this form does not combine all of the best qualities of all of those other forms. It gets a good chunk of them, but it doesn't stand out in the face of what is a roster all preceding these two of boss killers. I have Anil's Janice next on the list, largely because it is a really high investment unit. It does not start out particularly stand out-ish, but if you fully invest into it, it ends up being, I would say, among the better units in the game. So it definitely can't be in D, and it can't be low on C if it has the claims to a really efficient way of clearing. This is 100% helped. If this only had this is 100% helped by its part capacity. If it had a part capacity of 2, it would probably be down at the bottom of C, or maybe the top of D. But it has 4 parts. So whatever you would like to do, however you'd like to push it, you have that luxury, and having extra parts is really such a flexible boon for a unit to have. So frequently I'm looking at a robot that I am building and going just one more part slot. And you could still probably feel that with Anil, right? This Janice. It doesn't have to be piloted by Anil. This Janice. And I'll be everyone would like to equip every part if possible, but one or two parts are probably not pushing that unit into an identity. They are shoring up an identity and improving an identity that already exists. 4 parts, you can kind of get to turn the character into whatever you'd like. I mean, we can't make this thing do energy-based attacks, right? There just aren't any. We don't have the ability to drop stats, but you know what I mean, right? It can block, it can dodge, it can go into combat a lot, it can go into combat a couple of times and take out really big targets. It has a great deal of flexibility, which all sounds like it should be a really good unit, but It shows up in the third quarter of the game, so we're not getting a lot of points for availability. And as I've said before, availability rates very highly to me. A unit can't get a lot of credit if you just don't have access to it for most of the game. And also because in order to get that like really highest punch out of it, you need to dedicate a lot of funds into it. And odds are you probably already have a pretty tight team by that point who, if they don't already have their funds, if they already haven't previously used your budget, there are some points that are left on them that are probably asking for your budget's attention more so than trying to start a unit from scratch. I do think I accept that maybe some of these C tier units are a little bit misplaced. I am used to thinking about games where a unit was a collective of both a character and a job, but those were inseparable from each other. Or at the very least, so far as if you were upgrading one, the other was going with it. You couldn't upgrade them separately. But in the case of this game, it is maybe fair to give units a little bit more credit than I would otherwise if they are able to change their pilots, because you could have been training any of the Gundam X pilots in something else before the Vertigo. Sorry, that's not the Vertigo. This is the Janice. You could have been training them in the Janice and move them over to it if the unit suits your needs a little bit better. So you're not losing out on that same problem as having like a pilot that is like strapped into their unit. And the only way that either of them are getting resources if both of them are getting resources. Like you could bring a like at level or higher wits to this Janice, and that is actually a pretty viable choice. I guess further, like this isn't counting towards its credit really immediately, but like I said in part 1, I also want to try and equip you all with the tools to be able to like educatedly make an assessment like this, or try to contradict mine if I've done something that is, or sorry, I guess try to argue mine if I've done something that is contradictory. In the same way that having a multitude of parts lets you customize your unit, a multitude of pilots also lets you do that. You kind of get to pick and choose what spirits you want on this unit. So if you think about the robot as like the primary character and their parts and their pilot as like accessories you can equip, having the ability to change out your pilots is also like a really big boon. Again, if the Janice was just strapped to Anil, this would probably be considerably lower. Anil is not the best of pilots. And again, that would also sort of be placing this unit localized around the fact that you are getting everything in it much later into the game, where at least you can get some pilots, some experience that you want to be going in this later. The trouble is, though, it's really hard to warrant switching into this, where if you're starting with your like early cast of Jared, Wits, and Roy B, I do not love the Gundam X and the Leopard, as you can see that they're down in the D tier. So I've not really recommended to train them already, so that odds are you're going to have just Wits piloting the Airmaster, and you probably aren't going to switch out of the Airmaster into this, because the Airmaster, while way more specific, can just do that job way better. So like, a lot of things are going for it in the abstract, but when you apply them to this game specifically, they don't quite pan out. Which I know is a lot of time for a unit that is not, which I said is like fine, but I think that's going to inform a lot of these units. You'll see that a good chunk of the characters that are down here are ones that can have different pilots, and I don't think this game was kind to them, because A, the variety of pilots is distributed dramatically across the game, and B, there are such overwhelmingly, in air quotes, correct choices for those pilots to begin with that there's little reason to switch into others, which we're about to see through this like list of Gundams. Especially the Double Zeta fully armored is definitely like I said about some of these previous situations, it is 100% an improvement over the Double Zeta, but it's also, again, say with me, very late. It's showing up at the same time as the Excellences and the New Gundam and the Sasabe. I just have to knock it down some credit, despite the fact that it is a snap-off unit that we have 2 HP bars we're working with, and pretty chunky ones at that. It can't transform, so it loses some of its utility compared to its de-armored form, right? We're splitting the difference from the de-armored form being 5 move and the G-Fortress being 7 move to the fully armored having 6 move, but still, that is a downgrade. You don't have the ability to put your unit in the context that you need. The mobility is the same, so at least they tried to retain its identity as more of a dodge tank. But the double Zeta just guzzles energy at all times. The full armor is no exception. It's not worse per se than the regular Zeta, but I'm already not giving the regular Zeta, the regular double Zeta, a lot of credit because energy costs are just so high. Like, at least you're outputting a decent chunk of damage, and its map attack is also large. But I will say that the double Zeta, the shedding the armor does restore your energy, which is like pretty worthwhile to get access to some of your attacks again. But when you have attacks that cost 180, you're also like you're restoring it for like 1 or 2 turns, and then someone's got to babysit the double Zeta pretty much the whole game to be able to like keep it in the fight. I think I would be a little bit higher on it if we had a resupplier from the Universal Sentry so that we could like keep tagging out pilots the same way we do with the Mazingers. But no such luck, we just have a repairer. A repairer. But in the same way that I've said for a lot of, as I was just saying about the Janice Kai, there are a lot of units that characters already want to be in. Admittedly, you have an opportunity to try them out in the Zeta first before you see the double Zeta. But a lot of the UC pilots benefit from having really long ranged attacks, which I am not a fan of, for reasons I discuss in part 1, and we'll probably get to when we get to the Cubelays. But you probably want longer ranged attacks on them, and while the double Zeta full armored does have one, it doesn't have just one long-ranged attack. It has 1 ammo for that 1 long-ranged attack. So I guess, forgive me, I was wrong when I said the Great Mazinger and the Mazinger might be the only ones that have a single ammo. I'd forgotten about the full armor because I just don't use it. I think it finds itself among the rest of the company of G Gundam pilots, where it's like a little bit in the middle ground between a tank and a dodge tank. An HP tank and a dodge, or I guess in this game, an HP/armor tank. There's not a difference between the HP and armor tank, really. And the dodge tank, which I don't need to tell you that having a focus on something is pretty well better in games than having something that is genericized. And one of the ways that the fully armored is supposed to tank is using its beam coat. It does have decently high armor. Like, it has armor comparable to what I praise Katra for, but where Katra is able to not expend a resource that is already at a premium on his unit, the double Zeta both needs to use its energy for its high-powered attacks, otherwise it is behaving very piddly, but then is also needing to spend that as part of its tanking resource. Like, you don't get to opt out of that. So you're just going to be burning resources. You are going to be spending your energy from both ends, and that's definitely not to its benefit. I think especially for these like snap-off or like, especially for these snap-off forms or like one-off forms, I don't need to use them the entire scenario, but what is the use case if I was using them for the entire scenario? If I can't really imagine using them for the entire scenario, they're not going to like rate that highly. I would say as it happens, I would say if you can get about halfway through a scenario while keeping the form on, that's like pretty neutral to me. If you can keep the form on for the whole scenario, that is credit beyond neutral. And if you are going to shed the form or actively need to shed the form early on into the scenario, usually that's going to be negative credit in my mind. You're going to be losing points for that. But I could be, I don't want to speak so generally that I couldn't be persuaded another way. In the case for the double Zeta, that's like very much where it is, where you're probably not going to be keeping this around the entire map. The Gundam Mark III is just a really disappointing, really competent unit. It's not bad like the Jigan. I want to compare it directly to the Jigan because it's what you get instead of the Jigan if you do one of the secrets. But you do need to do a secret to get it, and it's just kinda underwhelming. It doesn't have that really any standout stats. It has no unique abilities to speak of, no unique attacks. It has a 2 to 6 range attack, but like lots of Gundams do. It's just fine, which is okay, right? But like units that are just fine belong in the C tier. That's like literally what it is for. It will fill roles. If you have a leftover UC pile that you want to train up to get to, like, say, the new Gundam or the Sasabi later on, and you already are committed all of your other pilots to all of the other UC units that you want to use, the Gundam Mark III is probably where that character is going to go. There are worse choices, but there are also better choices. It's definitely just a slot filler. There's not much else to say about it. Which, though, you may be surprised to see in front of the Zeta. I think the Zeta got done pretty dirty this game in how the stats for transforming worked out. It in my mind is the like quintessential dodge-based unit for the Universal Century, and its mobility out of its transformed form is actively pretty low for a unit that is supposed to be focused on dodging. Like, if you look at like the Daitarn, for instance, that's gonna have lower mobility, but it only gets 95 mobility, and I would say like you probably want to be hitting triple digits out of your mobility, if not more. I mean, like, obviously the more the better, but like as a baseline for good. And you need to be in the Wave Rider to do that, and you are down to 2 actions when you are in Wave Rider mode, and the only one of the 2, the one that's post movement, is a 1 to 4 range 1900 power attack, is like just not cutting it. The machine is actively worse than the Airmaster. I think they compare pretty favorably directly to each other. It's like actively worse than the Airmaster. It has 1 fewer usable attack post movement, way less ability to use them repeatedly. It has 10 ammo and 30 energy, respectively, instead of 20 ammo and 20 ammo. So like you also have to split your resource if you just want to give it like extra energy or extra ammo to attack more often. And the pilot pool for the UC Gundams, I would say, is better than the pilot pool for the Afterward Gundam X in general, but I think the best quality pilots of Afterwar Gundam X are, you have a smaller pool of much better pilots. And if you, like, this is one of the reasons why I've sort of hemmed and hawed about making tier lists like this, and why we're going to make another one later to talk about, like, immediate use case, like, usability rather than necessarily efficiency. Right, so like if you're looking at someone like Lancero or Jamil when he can switch into other units, their new type X is going to look very, very good on some of those Afterwar Gundam X pilots. It's just better than regular new type. But you also aren't going to have them for the whole of the game. So like, yes, if you have them, they're incredible. They will probably outperform most of your pilots in terms of accuracy and dodging. But characters like Amuro are going to be around for a much earlier portion of the game. You get the Zeta and the double Zeta at the same time. They are chapter 22, somewhere around there. Hold on. Let's not guess. Let's check my notes. Yes, 22. Which to me is still the middle late game. I created the system and I can't remember how I named them. It's in the middle late game. So that's like, you know, there's some scenarios that have taken place. It can't get a lot of credit for having not participated in the whole of the game. where I feel like a lot of what's happening with the Zeta is statted as if you were going to be getting it somewhere in the teens range. It does have the grand distinction of being one of the few, like, high-quality melee units for the UC, and Judo especially appreciates that, but it's still A, one ranged, B, you need to have morale of 120, which is not a cost. Even with ace bonuses, you're only getting up to 110, so like you still need to find a way to get that extra morale somehow. It is it's one range post movement, and it has to be done in your lower movement form, not your higher movement one. And like the other attacks that the unit has that are ranged are still probably just better, and it's not like there's not like a universal sentry like Master Asia equivalent, right? Even Judo, who has good melee, still also has good ranged. It's only a 3-point difference in favor of melee, that is. So it's not like he's upset to have to use a 3600 power like ranged attack. That one needs a combo to do, but like if you're not doing that, I guess then like a 2700 power ranged attack, like technically the melee is better in terms of damage, but you are covering the same amount of ground between the two. There is it's a what 1.67%. It's a 1.67 times energy cost, and there's also a morale threshold. It's just, yeah, the numbers did not come together for this one, but I definitely really fault it for having, like, it has stats that it wants to use, but it has it in a form that really can't make use of them very well. You, like, theoretically want to have it sit in place, and then it can use its, like, 2 to 7 or 2 to 6 range ranged attack that isn't post movement, but like typically with dodge tanks, I either want them, typically with these kind of characters, I either want them to have really far range so they can just stay out of combat entirely, or I want them to be able to sit in the middle of units and be able to counter attack while dodging attacks. Like R does not have that like accuracy dodge degradation that later games do, so you can just like pop an enemy or pop a character in the middle of enemies and just like hold there the entire map. This is 2 to 6, so you can't even use it if they're in melee range with you, and like enemies aren't going to stay where they are, you know. Yeah, it's just it split up a perfectly good unit and made it into 2 equally very imperfect halves. Okay, we need to talk about one of my least favorite units, kind of, in this game. The GX Divider is unfortunately saddled with the grim distinction of being attached to my least favorite mechanic, which is to say, waiting. The GX Divider, if it was not a form of the Gundam X, would definitely be ranking somewhat higher than this. Not a lot higher. Like, I think, without thinking about it too long, I would put it probably somewhere up near the, like, Vertigo Double Zeta range, right? So it's not changing, actually. I keep saying Vertigo, I don't know why. The Janice Fully Armored Double Zeta range. Like, it's not changing positions really deeply. I might be argued into the bottom of B, but probably not. But it's a unit that you, A, do not get on your own. It's parts you get for the Gundam X. So it's already stuck in amongst a unit that is like could be committed somewhere else. But the Gundam X, and we will talk about this more when we get to it, you have to wait so many turns to get access to some of its best attacks. Those attacks are good, but you don't want to wait that many turns. So odds are it's probably not going to see a lot of action, because either A, you're not going to deploy it because you got better things to do, or B, you need to micromanage it so much to be able to actually use its best attack so you don't like waste a couple of turns of charging the satellite cannon, that it's probably not going to get a lot of kills anyway because it's been out of position to make sure it can like land its one really good big attack. So like, you're not going to have its pilot invested into. Why do I want to spend resources on it if it already can like one-shot something because of its like big heck-off cannon? Yeah, and like I know I've said none of the qualities about the GX Divider yet, but like being attached to being attached to one of the worst units is, I mean, it's definitely a downside. But it does correct the greatest problem of the Gundam X in that none of its attacks require you to charge. All of its attacks can be performed just normally with the normal parameters of the game. That said, there is also only like one that I actually like, and that is its namesake, Divide. It's 2800 power with a 2 to 5 ranged post movement attack. I don't love that it's 2 to 5 and not 1 to 5. I know it's not nothing, but if you're moving to get into combat, odds are that means you are close to the enemies, and enemies will move adjacent to you if they can. So, you know, you are also then stuck just not using that attack up close. It's just reaching levels of mobility that make me interested in it, but you are probably still not going to have a lot of pilots that can like fully take advantage of it. I don't think this can be a dock against it because you can just switch the pilots, but like it would just look better if Jamil got to be its starting pilot instead of Jared. But Jared does start and he does not have new type X to begin with. So you're going to need to put Jamil in it if you want to use it, I think, to its fullest potential. I guess this is also worth saying, if you're like a real big fan of combination attacks, the GX divider cannot, how is it? It prevents you from using combination attacks with the double X somehow. I don't remember which of them can't use it. If it's in just the Gundam X form, both pilots can use it. But if it's in the GX form, one of the two units can't. So you're also just like cutting out an attack from somebody else too. It's just like, this honks. But yeah, like there's not a lot else to say. It's like standout feature is that it just removes the ability that the unit, it removes one of the downside abilities that the unit has, which is the satellite cannon charging. And that's pretty all right. The Super Gundam is kind of what I wanted the Gundam Double Zeta to be in principle, but not in execution. The Super Gundam is the like armored version of the Gundam Mark II, but unfortunately, all of the knobs were just turned down low. It base has 85 mobility, so not stellar, and none of its weapons crest 3000 damage. We're sitting at like lots of 1000s and one set, and then 2000, 2400, 2600. Like none of these are standout. None of these are standout actions, and all three of its best attacks are not post movement. So you're like camping in place for a character that's like not even generating you that much damage. It can transform into the G Flyer. If you're familiar with the show, you would assume that means the G Flyer, that is the G Flyer like snapping off and leaving it. Like no, they don't separate. The whole thing turns into the G Flyer. It looks like just the thing that docks onto the back of the Gundam Mark II to make the Super Gundam. But then it can just change back. But if it were to lose HP, it would then snap that off into the regular just Gundam Mark II. But it has the same problems that the Wave Rider of the Double Zeta has. But again, just like, it is pretty much all around worse than the Double Zeta in all of its parameters, save but for the fact that there's just a second unit and HP bar hidden within it. But the Gundam Mark II is also like the generic of the generic. It has lots of like very close range, or like 1 to 5, which I would say is average in this game, attacks. Almost everything is ammo based, but like I'm probably not going to be restoring the ammo parts. I'm probably not going to want to be dedicating parts to restoring the ammo for like a 2400 based attack, and that's like only 4 instances of ammo for that, right? Like that does not inspire within me a great deal of confidence. But speaking of those ammo attacks, admittedly, that is not like the only thing it has, right? Like the rest of it, despite what I would have assumed, that assumption being that these attacks would be energy based because they shoot lots of beams, it does mostly get ammo as its source of damage. So like, I'm not saying if you're going to invest into it, you shouldn't use ammo. It's just that like I would rather spend those parts elsewhere. I think a lot of the UC Gundams suffer from being generic in terms of like not having a very dedicated role. I do have like the Gundam Leopard, for instance, in D tier, but it is doing its job way better and way more specifically than the Super Gundam is, because the Super Gundam just like doesn't have a really defined niche. It's just that the niche of really long-ranged pilot is not necessarily super valuable to me, or if you do want to put it on your team, like having a plethora of them is not really doing you any good. But I would still rather have one or two dedicated units. I would still rather have one or two units dedicated to something very specific than just a like handful of like cool guys I found that can like kind of do a little bit of everything, but can't really do any of it enough that they can do it independently. But some credit where it's due. It does have 3 part slots. I think it would probably go over the double Zeta, the fully armored double Zeta, if it had 4. And the G Flyer does have 8 movement, so you can pair that with any of the UC pilots that have Excel. Which ones do off the top of my head, I don't remember, just because I don't use a lot of UC pilots, because the rest of their units are kind of bummers. But you could crank this up to 11. So if you, for whatever reason, just have a like vastly over leveled UC pilot, like I suppose if you really wanted to, you could train someone in the Methus and like swap train them between the Methus and something that does damage, and then once you get the G Flyer, you could switch into that and then give yourself 11 movement. But like, you could still probably also just like commit. You could probably help participate in the fight a little bit better. Also, I guess, because I didn't say this before, I just like, the moment struck me now that I did not talk about this. All of that is to be true about the Zeta Gundam too. Like the Zeta Gundam also gets 8 move in Wave Rider. And both of them have Wave Riders that function, or like transformed mobile armored modes that function practically the same. So like, I did not plan this out well. If you can't tell that, again, like I wrote out a lot of my thoughts, or I have a lot of plans for my thoughts. I just like am not reading off a script. Both of these two can hit 11 movement, and you can with Excel. It's just that like extra movement is good, but if you're moving a character that doesn't do anything, then like, so what? If the next sprite looks a little bit weird to you, that is also because I chopped this one together in the same way that I did the Ice Tavalises, which is to say we're looking at both forms of the mass production new type Gundam at the same time. So both the Incom and the fin funnel forms. I don't know why. So the Incom form is the one you have during the future tutorial, and you can't change the 2 of them. So like, I get why you'd use it there because it's the only option you have, but I don't understand why you would ever use the Incom form when you have access to the fin funnels. You can switch them. You were allowed to switch that during intermission. I originally thought it was because the fin funnels, like the fin funnels attack, not the name of the unit, had a new type requirement to them, but every pilot can fulfill that requirement, so it doesn't matter. And that's like, I think that's the only change. Let me check my notes. Yep, that's it. That's the only change. You just have different attacks, which makes sense given like how it's like designed, right? Like it's just a pack that's on the back of it. And unsurprisingly, it's a generic version. It's a mass production version, so it is just in all ways worse than the new Gundam. And it at least has the role of being long ranged. So like I was just saying, actually I probably should have used this as an example rather than the Leopard. It's good at doing what it does, right? Like it's placed higher than the Leopard, despite the fact that it comes later, because it's very good at doing what it does. But it's rare that I actually want something to do that thing, right? It has 85 mobility and 800 armor. It shouldn't be in combat, and like the range of its attacks also say that. But like, you kind of need to move forward, and this game is not going to let you just like sit there with your units. Like you are going to be forced to engage, kind of. And the ones that are engaging at the front are probably going to be doing most of the damage and the this new type Gundam was going to just be picking them off, and like pretty much every robot can just pick them off. It does have an eye field, so like there is a barrier involved here, and like that's good, but I think if you're relying on survivability, something has gone wrong. I would say this eye field is more as a like stopgap measure for 1 or 2 combats, rather than like how it's sort of designed with the double Zeta, where you could just like toss it into the middle of enemies and it would probably fade like a whole turn of attacks. So here is an example of a unit that I really like that is lower down than you would expect if I say I like them. The Death Scythe Hell custom is also kind of got ruined by the like basic parameters of this game. It's down here for, largely speaking, just the fact that it has a 1-2 and a 1-3 range set of weapons and nothing else. It's way too close proximity for its own good. It fits with like the vibe and design of the unit for sure, but that doesn't change the fact that it's not going to get a lot of credit from me when we need to be moving. And it also can't change pilots, so like we can't customize it by its pilot to try and make up for that shortcoming. It is of the units that can use the extra range on their weapons, it's one of the best. It's probably one of the better units to do that with. But I don't think those parts, a lot of units want to add extra range to their attacks. So those parts aren't as free as they could otherwise be, thus sort of like giving him a niche to fill that is using resources that you have that are like otherwise unused, you know? He also has a beam coating and a hyper jammer. The like extra ability based defenses really do help out his survivability. He, like all of the I think all the Wing Gundams generally tend to be more defensive than mobility based, but not as much so as like the G Gundam pilots. So having some abilities to be able to take some hits for him too are really good, but their activation rate, well, I mean, beam coating activates all of the time, but like hyper jammer activation rate is inconsistent. It's among the best activations for all of the abilities. It's a 50%. It's a coin toss, but it's still not consistent, so you still can't rely on it. Duo is a pretty good pilot for this unit. He does have he has high melee compared to his range, but he does not have that high of melee, relatively speaking. He could have had higher to like definitely push this unit into being like, it's okay that it has low range, because if it gets near you, you're just dead, right? Like, he's not even ranking in amongst the top quintile of melee damage users, and he is supposed to be melee focused. Like, what happened there? If I do plan on using him, I love tossing a Haro on him. That's kind of the only part he needs. His other part slot can go to just whatever you want, probably something junky, like even just like +5 mobility is fine, and that will do him perfectly. He uses the Haro probably among the best of your units, because there's no cost to beam scissors. His best attack is 2500 attack, so like just being able to get to use that like repeatedly, consistently, pretty nonstop is just phenomenal. But like everyone wants to use the Haro, so like that's not, you can't get points for that. Oh, I guess this is worth saying now that we're going to be seeing a lot more of the Gundam Wing pilots. One of the reasons I also rate them lower is they just have a handicap compared to most other pilots, which is they all have self-destruct, and self-destruct is just a non-spirit in this game. If you could use it post-movement, I would say it's maybe a real viability, but you just so infrequently want to be sacrificing your own unit to just maybe do some damage to something else. It's a little bit more like he's working with 5 spirits, and it's one of his starter ones too. So he's like working with 2.5 spirits. He gets fortune at the end of his spirit track, but like it's his last one, so you're going to be waiting for a while. Yeah, just again, nothing stand out. That's like the definition of where C goes. The God Gundam plus Foon Psyche. You will notice we still haven't talked about the God Gundam yet, so no guesses as to what part of this is bringing it into C. that extra movement from Funseki is just incredible. But like, the attacks are all still close range again, so we're just doing a lot more of this, like, well, we can't give you something good, because if we give you something good, that would make you good. So instead, we're going to need to take away a lot of your... whereas we're going to need to take away the qualities that could make this really powerful by giving you just one range or 1 to 3 ranged attacks. And again, not all that much damage, right? The God Gundam to me says, come in swinging. We're going to take some hits, but we're going to dish out way more. And the God Gundam plus Funseki is not doing that. I've already ranked the hyper mode, which is so much better. But you do still need to go through some turns of being in regular mode first. So what I try to do is move Doma next to Funseki on turn 1, have Funseki use Rouse, and then once he's done using his spirits, move him on and then form the units so they can do it next turn. So they could like go to combat next turn. But you do still need to hit the requirements of getting to 120 morale to hit hyper mode. We're definitely like pushing into armor more, but like 1150 is still not enough. We need more than that. The other Gundam boys have had those amounts, and that still didn't qualify them for being defensive. So like, yeah, I don't know why they just didn't give this unit any stats. This boy needs some help. At least the horse has good spirits. Let's rock all of the Ice Nivalis customs all at once. They're all here because, like everything else, they're all late game. They are also part of that package of 32 from 32 that you're getting. So they can't contribute the entire game. Rather than being designed around changing them to fit the environment that they are in, they have been moved to a much more generalized playstyle, which I don't mind. I think the real big advantage / change that is happening is we are moving to ranged based damage as one of the defaults for like a good use weapon, and 3 of our 5 pilots here are better at range than melee. So like if all of them have to have the same, and I don't think they all must, I'd rather it be I'd rather the thing that we are prioritizing be the one that more of our pilots are doing. And B, they have an energy ability immediately off the bat. One of the reasons why I ranked the other Ice Nivalis as lower was because they don't open with an energy-based ability, so they can't take advantage of their defining quality with the gravity wave array, gravitational wave antenna. Oh, right. I used the phrase array to describe the system of abilities that was happening in the previous episode. But all of these have to still be lower than their original forms, even though they have better use of energy, because you only get to use them for 5 scenarios. So like, that's like practically no part of the game. I do have Akito first, just because you're probably going to want to be using the Black Serena. It's high movement and like ludicrous HP bar, in parentheses, really incentivizes its use over any of the rest of them. But we have a similar problem as we did previously with combination attacks, where in the past you needed to be in the exact same form type and you couldn't use the artillery to make combination attacks between Akito and Guy, and then also Ryoko, Hikaru, and Izumi. Now Akito needs to be in this Ice Nivalis form to do a combination attack with Guy, and you need to shed 1 or 2 of the Black Serena forms, and you cannot get those back. The combination attack is by no means the end-all, be-all of anything. It's pretty minor in my mind, but it is like still something that is worth considering. Like, you do still need to note it, which is also why that Guy is in, like, I don't think this would have changed Guy from B to C, but it is at least part of one of the things that I thought of when I moved him to C rather than having him adjacent to Akito, is that, like, yeah, you do have a combination attack, but it kind of almost doesn't exist because you want Akito in the Black Serena more. You're only probably switching to the custom form, if at all, when you get to, like, the very end portion of the game. In which case, they're also not doing enough damage to really get really warrant getting anything done, right? Like you're not going to be dropping your forms to then like suddenly get to do 3,000 damage instead of 2,700 damage. Like that's just not worth it. Oh, sorry, my apologies. 3,500 damage, not 3,000 damage, but still, like that's practically that is practically a non-existent change as far as trying to like overcap damage to hit bosses. And then otherwise, Ryoko and her ability to be more independent later in the game because you've already invested into her makes her like drivable, positionable leadership way better than it did before, where everyone just sort of had to be glued to a battleship that already had leadership attached to it. And then I value Hikaru next because of money, and these units are definitely more designed about going to combat. So Izumi having Daunt is not as much of a boon at this point in the game, where like you probably have enough Daunts to like take the boss down to 50 without her help using other units, like more SP bot oriented units. Or those characters could also just like fight in combat at this point. So not that Izumi can't, just that like she does not excel at it. It's just like okay. They're very good at clearing out or like they're very good at clearing out the most generics, like the first wave of generics, or like tag teaming or finishing off after another pilot jumps in for the like sub bosses of scenarios. But like that's not the most high of feats to achieve. So they have to be insane. Let's talk about the Alstromerias. I had debated marking 4 of these down instead of just these 2, just to like make a point about talking about them, because this like bothers me. I don't know why they did this, but it's just me being petty and not more informative, so I decided not to. For some reason, one of the Alstromerias that shows up, the one that has Genichiro in it, is just worse. Like, not that one starts upgraded or not. Like, if you upgrade both of them, one of them just has lower stats. Like, why didn't you just keep it the same? It's like not that much of a change either. It's like what, 15 points of mobility and like 800 points of damage. Like it adds up. Like obviously you want the one that has the 2 stats that are better. But like what was so important about this unit that required you to give us a second one that had like modified stats to it? I don't understand. It feels like it's got to be like a developer oversight where like this is probably what stats were at one point and they changed one and forgot to change the other because it was like 2 independent variables, you know? So like if you're going to use these, use the one that has better stats. And if you feel that you need to put both pilots onto the battlefield, just put the one you like less, or just like put Genichiro into the worst one. But you're probably using both Alstromerias first over using a Tetsujin, I think. The Alstromeria's claim to fame is its Distortion Field, Boson Jump, Energy Regen ability pool. Distortion Field is another barrier-based attack. It reduces damage by 1/3 unless you are a gravity-based attack, in which case any damage you deal from 2,500 points or below is just fully negated, and then any damage above that is fully negates the barrier. So that's like a decent defensive profile, right? Like you're really hampering damage with it. Just a shame that its armor is pretty low. Like it's kind of relying on that for taking hits. But the other upside is that it has Boson Jump, which is another coin flip dodge chance ability. So like you can get some decent defensive work out of it. Like don't depend on it, but it can probably handle like 3 or 4 enemies on its own. And energy regen small tries to make up for how Distortion Field is working, but you also like you have to wait a full turn cycle to get access to that energy again. So like you can't just Distortion Field indefinitely. I sort of slow rolled the worst part of it. It has a 1 attack. It's post movement and 1 to 5, so like that's good. That's like the bare minimum. I guess. Also, sorry, it does have good stats otherwise. It's plus 40 hit and plus 30 crit. That's not like standout among melee. Melee tends to be more accurate. but like at least it gets to keep that part of it. Like you're probably going to be landing with this attack, and it's probably going to be doing something. But it does cost you 20 energy, so you also don't have the option of trying to like pick and choose which weapons you're going to use to try to account for having some extra energy left over for distortion fields, you know? You get Genichiro in his so late into the game also. He is one of the ones where I was hemming and hawing over like what counts as a pool of units. Because he is post 32. It feels like he is supposed to be that like late game sage kind of like really big strong character to help you carry, and like he does things, but he's definitely not that. He definitely feels like an afterthought in the game's mind. If the tutorial was a little bit longer, you do get to play. Genichiro has a unique distinction of being the only character that shows up in the tutorial that isn't the main character. So I guess it's not unique, but among the non-main characters. Among the characters you don't get to keep from the tutorial, he is himself during the tutorial. And if that was a little bit longer, like 2 or 3 more stages, I might be a little bit higher on him coming back as like bookending the Nadeshiko side of things. We could be like, oh yeah, I remember this character. We like invested some stuff into him. I saw he had a spirit that I really wanted to use. He had this like 90 cost spirit. I wonder what love does. And then seeing him at the end of the game where he comes back like fully loaded with the ability to cast all those spirits. But like that's just like not the experience about with him at all. Like that's just not how he works. The Cubelays are both really easy. They are just worse versions of the new Gundam and Sazabi. They've just taken some of their elements and lopped them right off. Sometimes I will say having additional copies, even like downgraded versions of units that are good, is still pretty decent, but I wouldn't even call the Sazabi and the new Gundam good. And you don't even have like really full extra copies of them. You kind of have like 2 dumpy half copies. It's the like last piece of food in the bottom of the bag kind of version. There is technically 2 differences between the 2 forms. If you're looking at mobility and armor, and this should have been like way earlier in any of these conversations, but mobility is basically 1-to-1 the same as armor in terms of like numbers and which values you want. Not exactly, but close enough. But if you just like slap a 0 on the end of mobility or take a 0 from the end of armor, you can compare them pretty directly, right? So in my mind, when we have 80 mobility and 900 armor, and then 85 mobility and then 850 armor, we've done a like 1-to-1 trade. Do you see the logic that I am applying? Right, we've turned that 5 into a 50, but that is basically the same when you are counting for how those 2 systems work in relationship to each other. Which is to say, there was a way faster way of saying this. The Puru model is more defensive and is more HP armor tanky than dodge tanky, and the Puru 2 model is more dodge tanky than HP armor tanky. But they are both energy based because they have all like the bits and lasers firing. And the Puru 1 version just has way more starting energy than the Puru 2 version. So I like care about that more because you're going to be able to like actually get your attacks off. A 5% mobility change is not enough for me to change those positions in the face of just like needing to pass through an entire turn because you can't take an attack. Next up are the Shining Gundams. We can finally finish with this little cycle that I started at the beginning. So the super mode for the Shining Gundam is obviously better than the non-super mode, but it's not that much better. They also suffer from the same way that the God Gundam does, which is to say just so much short range. It has a lot of attacks, but like it can't use all of them in one turn. It still only gets to use 1. It just needs to be up close. So why the heck did they give it 5 movement? That's the lowest movement a unit can have at base. Like, be close, but don't have a way to be close. Like that's not good. And then the super mode gives it +1 movement, but still, like one up from the most basic movement you can have is not it's not winning awards. I'm not gonna like it if I need to go fast. And even still, like I said with the God Gundam, even when it's close, it's not doing outrageous, ludicrous amounts of damage. Without super mode, it's doing 2800 at max. I mean, actually, like, that's not even true. Also, sorry, I forgot about this. I have not been looking at this. I've not been looking at this version of the Shining Gundam or the God Gundam in a while, so I just forgot how stupid this thing is. The Shining Finger requires you to be at 120 morale to be able to use it, and that's listed on its base form. But going to 120 morale puts you into the super mode. So why list that on the base form? I guess just as a way to tell you how to get into super mode because like you don't have the description for the ability on the text, but like, or on the screen, but like you're never going to get to use the Shining Finger in base form, which like again fits with how the character works, but like why list it there as if it's a thing that you can do with it? Because then you start doing this, then you sound stupid. So yeah, no, its base damage is 2000 at one range. That's its best base damage attack. And then in super mode, it can get up to a whopping 3,200 points of damage. And like, that's fine early on. Like, you're not gonna, there is a literal upgrade for it later in the game, but like, it's still so little damage for how low of a mobility you get. I don't think the Shining Gundam is worth it. And Domon has to be far worse than Rain because all of his spirits just relate to himself. But despite that, the God Gundam's hyper mode is still coming in lower than the Shining Gundam because you just get it so much later into the game. Honestly, I should give it more points because its existence puts Rain into the Shining Gundam and we need her on the battlefield somewhere. But like, why does it need to have, hold on, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Why does this need to have 15 unique attacks when 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of them are just one range? What is happening here? And they didn't give it extra movement, right? Like, it still has 5 at base and then 6 in hyper mode. That's entirely an unreasonable expectation for having a reach on a unit. That just like is not going to happen. And worse, because again, we can't have a unit like be good or be proficient or demonstrate any amount of like excel, which is not fully true because like some the Combattler and the Voltace and the Getter get to do this, but like I don't know why the Super Gundam doesn't. The God Gundam doesn't. It has 1 part slot. I don't know. It's because when you combine with Funsaiki, you put both of your part slots together, so you get 2 on Funsaiki or on God Gundam plus Funsaiki. But like, just give Funsaiki 1 and let God Gundam have 2. It'll be okay if it has 3. That's like a really good upgrade for it. But no, you get a downgrade when you switch from Shining to Burning. Why? It's not that much better. Like, we've not even improved our stats that much. In hyper mode, it still only has 1,000 armor, and you want it to be in close range? It has 95 mobility. Like, it's got God Shadow now, and that will activate sometimes, but again, that's not consistent enough to try and keep it safe. I just don't understand what the point of this was. The Tetsujin, to me, is one of the, like, top 3 units that I would like to play with again. Like, you have a playthrough where I try to feature this thing prominently, because I feel like I am deeply misplaying with it. The trouble is, I feel like I don't get enough time to really experience that because it comes in scenario 27. It's kind of late into the game, like that's still in the 3/4 mark. So it's not like end game, but it's not, you know, again, not the usual. It's not contributing for a lot of your time played, but it does give you 3 abilities that feel like you are way closer to the end of the game when stacked together. It does have Distortion Field, Boson Jump, and Energy Regen Small, so the same ability profile that the Alstrom has had, and those are coming much later. So it feels like it's a little bit out of place. Like, where it stands, it feels like it is 5 turns sooner than it's supposed to be. But I feel like I would like it to show up 5 turns sooner, and then we would be talking. Then I would be like, okay, you know what? Maybe this thing gets some credit. Maybe we bump this up to like be as a like transition into a like a late game carry. I just also really like its design as like from a Real Robot series. Not that you're getting to put the rest of the Real Robot pilots in it, right? Like we only have Genichiro and Shiratori here because you can't switch with the rest of the Ice Tavalis pilots. But like, it's also tanky, right? This thing has 8,500 HP to start. It's only got 1,100 armor, but like, that's okay when we've seen units that have tried to pretend to be tanky with 1,100 armor and having like 4,500 or like 5,000 HP, but like, no, this like 8,500 HP is pretty respectable. And then we also get a distortion field on top of that. Its energy economy is similar to the double Zetas. It's not nearly as dire, but it's a lot in that a lot of its costs are cheaper, but it also just has a little bit less starting energy, right? So like we have 180 to start and we have like 30s and 50s to spend rather than 200 to start where we have 80s and 100s to spend, right? Like you can see how it's better. But the problem is I have with most things, it's low movement. It's got 6 move. It doesn't have just 5. It has 6, but it only has a reach of 9 because it's like its best post movement attack is 1 to 3. It just feels like a large number of odd combinations of stats together. So I feel like I'm constantly using it in a way where I'm like, that felt like that didn't work, but I also feel like it's my fault, you know? I don't have a better way of describing it. I think I generally also misuse a lot of gravity-based weapons, so like this also might be entirely in the wrong place, trying to like think about how to apply gravity weapons. I don't know immediately off the top of my head where Shiratori and Genichiro fall in terms of getting their gravity weapons to break distortion fields. I have never felt like I've had a lot of success with it, but like I said, I've also not like super deep investment trained them. Which is why I have them in C, right? Like the fact that I want to try them, but I need to like focus down, I need to like try to plan around using them, does not scream A tier, you know? Like that, those are the kind of units that require you to pay attention to them because like they draw your attention because what else could they do but attract attention, where this requires my attention to attend to it, you know? I guess I didn't say this before too. Shiratori is just better than Genichiro because he comes way earlier. He shows up with the Tetsujin you get at first, so scenario 27 rather than scenario 33. Like there's no contest there. Even they have roughly similar spirits, but when you have to compare two pilots directly, the one that's available for twice as long is just gonna win. The Crowda is very similar to the Janice Kai Anil Custom. There are definitely a couple of different elements. Like we are missing an attack and we are doing a little bit less damage. But it is tied, it's Lancero's personal unit. So it's tied to, I think I described it as the second most intensive of secrets in the game. So like you have to go through a lot of hoops to get access to it. And like half of the scenarios, you just can't get it. Or half of the route splits, you just can't get it. So that's kind of knocking it down a number of places, but even still, it's like not that standout. It's another like it fills the role. It has stats that it needs, but the one element that does make it a little bit unique among the rest compared to something like how I've described. I said the same thing about the Gundam Mark III. Is it gets 13 points of upgrades instead of the base 10. So if you're willing to invest a lot into it, you could push its numbers pretty far up. But it also like doesn't have it only has 2 heart slots. It doesn't have the 4 like the Janice Kai does. So right, it's more stuck with its stats than could otherwise be. It does have 7 move to start, which is definitely doing it some favors. But again, being locked behind a lot of stipulations is kind of damning this unit to more obscurity. You're not going to get to play with it very long, and even when you do, you're probably going to want to be doing other things. The Gundam X team has better things to be doing. And the Fabril and the Vertigo are not them. The Fabril and the Vertigo are also just like basically duplicates of each other. The Vertigo technically has more weapons, but they're not ranged, and it's less dodgy, and like you want to be using ranged weapons and dodging with the Gundam X pilots, so why would I opt for more of less when I could just have more of what I already wanted to use, you know? They both have 7 ranged attacks, so they're more in line with the like sniper variety of units. The Fabril definitely, the Vertigo a little bit less so. I guess the like one thing about the Vertigo that makes it stand out is it has 7 movement instead of the Fabril's 6 or like the generic 5. I guess it can also go on land where the Fabril can't, but seldom am I getting that much more of my dodging out of like being in a forest with it. Because again, you just like also don't want them to be going to like you don't want them to be seeing active combat that much. The G Falcon. This is hopefully not going to take too long. So I have all of the Afterwar Gundam X pilots here rather than down the side because this is a slightly different placement because of the unique way the G Falcon works. It is not a combat unit. It's like how Funsaiki is, where the point of it is to combine, and a lot of its utility comes from pilots that get to use their spirits places. But the trouble is, all of these pilots sort of expect to be in combat roles, so you don't have the same level of like spamming spirits on other people that Rain and Funsaiki give you. So I tried to scale this a little bit around more how this team works. So you want a pilot in the G Falcon that can give the spirits to another pilot that you wouldn't otherwise get access to. So like, I have Roipy here not because of Daunt, because he could be anywhere and he could still provide Daunt. But instead, I have him here because he can provide, like, Parge. That is later into his kit than I was considering for other possibilities, but because the G Falcon is also in the late game, it's worth considering here. Roipy also has Wall, and the G Falcon, when it combines with other units, is always increasing their defense. So, like, that's the kind of logic I am talking about here, right? Where we want to be able to hand over spirits to pilots that we couldn't otherwise do. So it's kind of doing what Rain and Funsaiki are, but just for one person in particular. But because when it combines, it is with units you get somewhat later into the game. You get them earlier than you get the G Falcon. But I also just like don't love 2 of them. It's the Gundam Double X and the Gundam Leopard Destroy. Being able to hand spirits off that way is not a great feat. If this could hypothetically happen to any unit on paper, I would like this unit a lot. Even if you had to like pick a specific one, right? Like if we had something that worked like this, but I don't know, combined with the Iced Valises, for instance, right? Like that would be the premise of it is really good or interesting. It's just that, again, in execution, it's sort of let down by this game seemingly hating Gundam pilots. I've got Roipy first for all the like example reasons that I gave. Jared is second, largely because we want him to get some extra practice in this already. Like, we already want him deployed here because we want Jared and Tifa. Well, not just that, but he also gives Fortune, so we can finally switch that Fortune onto someone who can actually get a kill rather than him who usually isn't. He will have Valor by that point, pretty well guaranteed. I think pretty much all of them have Valor. Valor is the one where I'm like, it's okay if we have some overlap because we just get to like keep firing it on every attack that we do. And he has Bullseye, again, same reason. Pretty much everyone's going to have access to accuracy-based spirits, but he gets to double dip on ones that you want. But you're largely here because you want the Flash and the Zeal off of Jared plus Tifa. You know, because I don't use these units that much, I don't know if Tifa can hand to Jared, can then hand to the main pilot her new Type X. She can do it to Jared if Jared is the main pilot, but I don't actually know if she can do it for somebody else, and how that works if they already have new Type X. Because if she can just hand that off to anybody, and if she can hand it off in a way where it like double dips when someone already has it, there's like maybe something there that I'm underrating. But I feel like I would have noticed that when I like saw that unit combine when I was like playing with it. Jamil already has spirits that kind of stat him like he is a support unit because he starts in a battleship. So he also can like hand over some spirits that are worth having. He has Smite and Zeal, most notably. So again, we're trying to apply the most damage we can, and we are definitely like increasing damage with the combinations. So Lance Throw is maybe a little bit higher here than you would expect. In the regular list of pilots, I have him pretty low because of the stipulations on how long it takes to get access to him. But you are getting the G-Falcon around when you are getting Lance Throw, so like I don't want to double dock him here. Like he's already in a C tier, he's already like halfway through the C tier. So I feel like that kind of accounts enough for that experience of getting him later. But he also gets to do a quality that we really want on these pilots, which is to say he gets to excel someone. Paula will get to do that too, which is kind of the only thing she gets to do, and I will complain about that in a second. But Lance Throw, in addition to excel, also has Zeal. So we're gonna get to use this unit a lot more when he is around. And because he's going to be in a unit that's going to be seeing a lot of combat, he'll also get the XP to like make sure he gets up to Zeal and or the SP to like use it multiple times. Anil's pretty generic here. None of her spirits are like particularly exciting to toss onto other pilots. Like they'll do the job, but she is unsurprisingly not statted to flying this thing. But I mostly want to talk about Paula because I feel like she is such a disappointment. She is the person who comes in the G-Falcon, so she is, quote, supposed to drive it. And she offers focus, but like everybody does. She offers an accelerate, which is one of the other things that only her and Lance Throw can do. I hear you in the comments. Just settle down. We'll be there in a second. But like she has a trust. Sure, but you don't need to be in the G-Falcon to do that. She does have spirit, but like we don't need to be hitting, like morale thresholds are not that crucial for this unit. You'll have plenty of time. You already are probably going to be waiting if you're tossing this onto the double X. Like the one that needs the morale the most already needs to wait, so like that doesn't matter. Resupply doesn't matter. You can do that to anybody from anywhere. So like why are her abilities not statted around how the G-Falcon works in particular? And when she is trying to hand out things, she's not handing out anything that's that unique, right? Like again, we're not looking at rouses, we're not looking at blesses. I don't use trust that much, so like the only thing she's really handing out is resupply, and like that's good, but you need to be at level 46 to get it. Like if there's not a lot of reason to incentivize to put her into this thing to like start reaping like free EXP from being in combat with a better pilot. You're probably not going to hit the resupply then. Like it just, I don't know why they gave her these spirits the way that they did. So like the real only thing you're going to be using with her is Excel, as far as like docking onto one of the 3 combined units. And now Wits. So this is the reason why I think the Excel off of Lance Throw and Paula is good, because I think Wits is probably the best pilot for a unit that is going to get docked with the G-Falcon. I think Royby is overall singularly the better pilot, but the G-Falcon also always increases the unit with which it is combining. It increases its movement by 1. So if we pop that onto the Airmaster Burst, it'll have 10 movement at base. Sorry. It'll have 11 movement at base, and then with an Excel that jumps it up to 14. And now you might be saying, well, Wits already has Excel by himself. Like, that's true, but like I just said about double dipping, you're never, ever, ever not going to be casting Excel on somebody. So whenever you need to like break your spirits in a way such that you're not spending SP that you get to like keep access to a different spear, you now can always do that. One of the downsides of wits is that you might need to break up. You might be like, well, I need to move, like I need to go farther again. I'm just out of reach. But spending this is going to break up one of my focuses. Well, that problem doesn't exist when it combines with the G-Falcon, right? Like, you just always get to spend, someone else gets to be on focus duty, someone else gets to be on valor duty. So I think Wits is probably the best recipient for having the G-Falcon combined with his units. That's why I'm not ranking him higher in here, because, like, he can't both be the person who is best to drive the G-Falcon and also be the person who is best to receive the G-Falcon. You know, and like anyone could be in the Airmaster Burst. It doesn't have to be Wits in the Airmaster Burst, but I think I made my case before about why, if not Roy B in the Airmaster Burst, it should be Wits. And then because of these overlaps, I think in this context, if it's not the Airmaster Burst by itself, I think it is Wits plus the G-Falcon. But we can talk about that more when we get into the I'm not doing that tier. Next up is the Hyakushiki. It also just looks kind of like a nothing of a unit compared to the rest of the board. It has the like regular I'm a Gundam weapons and stats. It has a map attack, but like it's the range of that map attack is so small. Oh, also, you only get one ammo out of it. So, like, you need to keep resupplying it to get access to the one thing that makes it unique. Probably not worth it. I have said many things about the gear units on this channel, and most of them are mean. So I'm surprised, I'm a little surprised myself that I put Altair up here, but part of this is being carried by the fact that you can also get max upgrades onto the Knight gear as opposed to the Dendo. So like that's definitely helping. That's a lot of free money. Altair is like a pretty good pilot. He's like hitting among the higher values for many stats, the most two being melee and defense, which are the ones that he wants to have given his unit. But like it's still a gear unit. I'm not going to talk about them too much here because it makes more sense to do this when we talk about the Dendo. But you're really supposed to want to use the different forms, and the different forms are really minor. But the one with Altair doesn't have those forms, so like, yikes. The other reason for him being here though is like, you probably want to be using him a little bit for the end game because he's really the like end game sage super boss character that switched it over to your side that I talked about when talking about the Alstromarios. Because he gets the Phoenix form, which we'll talk about in a second, but we need to talk about a cowboy first. But yeah, like otherwise, he's just like not. He has armor like he's a Gundam, but then has mobility like he is a super pilot. Like, again, what happened here? I never want to use this man, but at least he has like a use case coming up, and that use case is so good that it's pulling up all the rest of the units around him. But that'll make sense in a second. Texas Mac is my vote for probably the best of the sniper units, just in terms of like their sniping capabilities. I put some other units that are a little further ahead that have some long range capacity, but that's also because they can do a couple other things. Like the Texas Mac is the purest form of sniper in having a 9 range at base weapon. So if you needed an excuse to not use the Death Scythe for whatever reason, this was probably it to try and snag all of those extra range parts, right? Like we want to either be taking a practically no range but a really good attack into a normal range so that you can use that really good attack all the time, or just like stand on one edge of the map, point across the screen and go you still, and then just like execute them. The real downside to this, though, is it has 3 bullets. So you're going to be resupplying him on the regular. And oh no, it's unfortunate, but that requires you to be at 120 morale to do it. So like, you're not gonna get to keep doing this long-ranged attack a lot. The high-powered rifle really should have either had a morale cost or an ammo cost, and unfortunately for the Texas Mac, it has both. Jack's a fine pilot. I like Mary because she gives you scans, and scans are good in early games. Having information is valuable, but like, plenty of people can do that too. But it's nothing without its rifle. Like the whole of its character is the high-powered rifle and the 9-ranged attack. So like, if you don't want that, and I think there's plenty of cases where I think I've given plenty of compelling reasons why you don't want or don't need that. It's just not gonna. That's it. Then there's no reason to use it. The Pastor King model, which is him on his horse, does have some improved stats. We're getting 700 extra HP, 40 extra energy, 10 extra mobility, 100 extra armor, and 2 extra movement. So like, again, all upgrades, all good. Why is it not in front? Because you get the Texas Mac early and you get the Pastor King late. So there's a pretty wide margin of scenarios between that. I think it's like something like 20-ish scenarios between the time you acquire both of those two. So like, the Pastor King just can't go in front. The Pastor King is a snap-off unit, despite the fact that it looks like it's just a flesh horse. It's a machine, and you can blow that up and then just keep getting that back all the time, between scenarios, mind you. So that does give the Texas Mac some multiple HP, which does a little bit solve my concern with the like sniper unit, where you kind of need to leave them in place. So like, you usually need to be prepared for them to take some hits, and typically they're Gundams and can't do that. So like, at least in this case, you have to chunk through like 10,000 HP with 1100 armor at base. So like, yeah, that probably will survive. It's definitely like distracting an enemy. You'll have to send someone back to probably get it, because the weapon you want to be using is 4 range at base smallest. So like, it's still not incredible, but it's definitely probably the best version of that. It does get an extra weapon though in this form, which is a 2 to 6 range, just regular rifle, but it only has 6 ammo. So, you know, if you were going with that plan of trying to improve its range, so like, if you've brought this up from like 9 to like 11, say, with 2 parts, right? Like, that's the lowest you can do it. You can get +1 2 different times. You then have the rifle at 8 range, so like, that's reasonable. But that's still going to lead you to problems with your like close range application. And while it's not supposed to be in close range, I don't think you can fully ignore the fact that, you know, it has a defensive profile that suggests it could be taking some hits and standing still and trying to fire at enemies coming in. Well, at some point, some of those enemies are going to arrive and you're going to need to have to deal with them. There's also a bit of a discrepancy between 8 move and a not post-movement 9 ranged weapon. If either of these 2 goobers learned charge, I think I might have this in A. I couldn't probably put it in S because it still requires a lot of ammo. But could you imagine having charge and being able to have a 17 base reach? that would be wild. That would be incredible. And I think the game knows that that's like maybe unreasonable, so it doesn't give you that. But like, that would be so cool. Just one small little change, one tiny little change, and this unit could jump from C to like the top of A so quickly. But otherwise, like, I guess that 8 move lets you catch back up once you've done your sniping, but then you're like still losing that turn because you're just moving forward. So like, that's not good. Okay. I have tried to forestall talking about the like actual assessment of the Dendo with my time in this game for as long as possible, but now we at least have to commit to 2 of them. This is gonna be kind of a combined entry, even though the Phoenix forms work differently. The standout quality of these 2, and the reason why I'm like forced to like very, very hard separate these from the rest of their ilk, is they have energy regen max. So when you spend all of your energy on your turns, the Dendo especially firing off its like question mark energy cost attack. Worry not, the problem of the Dendo battery is solved. I know we haven't talked about it yet, but well, don't worry. You're smart enough. You'll be able to apply this retroactively. You just like can be fully independent with it. It can just go fly off and take care of whatever it needs to do. If you need something to die, just point the Dendo at it and problem solved. It also has 9 range for its last attack, and it's also not post movement. But like, I kind of care a little bit less because you just get to annihilate anything that's in combat with it. Or at the very least, you can like pretty confidently get everything to a killable range. It does still kind of honk on the defense, like you're going to need to spend spirits to keep that safe. But like, if you just spending spirits can't be a downside. Requiring spirits to be able to like fully just survive, like that's when it becomes a problem. But if I want to commit some spirits to a unit that's like going to make the board prepared for me to clear it in the next turn or two, the 2 Phoenix forms really get that job done. I think as far as that goes, the Night Gear is a better version of that than the Dendo. But the Dendo just also has the upside of being able to like throw around big buckets of damage to clear the, what are they called? The Devil Gundam bosses, or just like finish off one of the 3 angels so that you can get into the Dominus boss. Otherwise, that's like kind of it. Their like max energy regen is the quality for them. Otherwise, they're just the regular forms of these 2, and those aren't that standout. You get them also, if you want to do the secret, you get them 1 turn before endgame. If you don't, you get them in endgame. But they will assure you that you have some way to clear things. If something has not gone right with your team, don't worry, these 2 will make sure you have some way of being able to end the game. So like, that has to be worth something. But it just can't be worth a lot because like, there's literally nothing that comes later than them. So they contribute the least. And they are slapped onto units that you probably already also aren't investing into. You theoretically could get all of the upgrades for the Night Gear for free, so that's definitely like a pretty big improvement, but you were also committing to a set of scenarios that I don't necessarily know that you want to, because you're probably going to be... The Dendo is generally force deployed in those scenarios, so like you're probably going to have to use it, and yeah, it's ill-advised to use as far as I am concerned. So like, you know, this is really the best you could ask for with 1 very polarizing ability. Like max regen energy is never looked better trying to pull these 2 out of the dumpster. The Ogre, for its best attack, instead just has a 30 energy cost, 4,800 power, 1 range post movement weapon instead of this like 1 to 9 but consumes all of your energy. So that's why I was saying it was better at doing the like just like block off all of the enemies, and if you don't just kill them, set them to an HP where on player phase you'll be able to take them all out. Especially because Altair also just like has better defenses. Like I said before, he's like one of the highest. I might actually consider it decent if Altair had wall. He does not, but probably should. But yeah, otherwise, again, just the only quality is using your best attack and having max regen. Or energy regen max. It's like you're playing with cheat codes on, but just for 2 units. I wish I could say more good things about them. But we'll talk about that more once we get to the bottom of D tier. But like, if you have them, you should use them. They will make those scenarios way faster for you. Just throw them at things. Spend spirits on them. They're worth spending spirits on. But don't be surprised if you still need to do things with the rest of your team to like fully finish the scenario. You know, energy does run out and the ability only applies between turns. I really want to like the Wing Gundam in this game. I think it's probably among my favorite sprites as far as like design and recreation of what the original looks like still faithfully here. Like, I believe in the wings having like actual like feather pinions in them. I also really like the Zero system. The Zero system is really good and really knowable when we don't have asymmetric levels, right? Like, everyone levels up 1 point every level, and the Zero system gives you 10 towards all of your stats. It is effectively the same as what the Super and Hyper modes do for the G Gundam pilots. But, like, the G Gundam pilots also get other stuff. Like, they get stats onto their units, too, where the Zero system does not. It's just the Wing Zero has some better stats than some of the G Gundam pilots, but Hero himself as a pilot needs the Zero system to be able to do much of anything. If you know anything about Gundam Wing, you know that this is like large bazooka rifle, big beam energy character. So like, of course he's going to be a sniper. And he's not, the base damage of these things is not very high. I also feel like I would not have been upset if the Wing Zero was the only one to have S in parameters, if we just like gave it S in air and space and land, like just give it S to all of its parameters. I think that would have been like a fine defining feature of it, because that would have like synergized well with this one to like keep stacking like incremental growth effects like morale and stats, rather than like having big base numbers to scale off of, you know. But that's wishful thinking. It has mobility and armor, neither in a way that suggested should be in combat. So again, like, more reasons why you're supposed to keep it out of it. It does have 8 movement to like catch back up, but like second verse, same as the first, like I said, with the Texas Mac, that still means probably at best you are taking a full turn off with it, and there's so many other units that do not need to ever stop. At least in this case, you are not stopping because you're running out of energy, probably. You're probably going to be dying with it first before it runs out of energy. So I guess that's an upside? It also has map attacks, and one of them, if you've watched my ARB playthrough, is hilariously useless, given the rest of the play pattern I've already described. Which is to say, it like just drops a big damaging circle in an area around it. Like, you are never going to be doing that. It shouldn't be close to enemies for that map attack to hit anything. Instead, that's probably mostly just going to be hitting your own team. Admittedly, in character for Hero, but like mechanically, I don't think so. Hero also suffers from, as I said before, he's a Wing Gundam pilot, so one of his spirits is self-destruct, so he's just also like down a spirit. He at least does have charge, which does let you like actually make use out of his long-ranged weapons. But he has among the lowest starting SP totals in the game. So like, again, this game just hates Gundam pilots. We could have had this really cool element, and like, you do get to have it, but just a sprinkling of it. You're not allowed to have it for very long. It also doesn't help that because we want to portray Hero as this sort of like flighty, non-committal character, he does show up regularly throughout the game, but you just like don't get to keep him for that long. So like, you can't invest into him, and like, he'll keep some of that XP, but because he's like not showing up on deployment, he's showing up after some flags in a scenario have been triggered. You're just like getting less time to apply him compared to what the amount of time, like the amount of scenarios he's present in would suggest, right? So like, if we got to have him around a lot longer, we could potentially have him at a higher level. Like, if the first time he shows up is in scenario 8, if you got to use him, even if he left for a portion between sometime after scenario 8 and the end game, if we just like got to have him start leveling up with like extra cheers on him right away, pressing that advantage of having a higher level with then jacking the level up even higher with Zero system could have made him a lot more viable. But because he is regularly just not present, even for the scenarios in which he is listed, he can't be that high up. He can't be that high up team. I'm sorry. I know he is a fan favorite. I think this and the new Gundam are probably going to be the most controversial, but this game, like I said, it does not do favors to units that have really long ranged, and lacking hit in a way is kind of a death sentence for any of those kind of characters. Let's try and breeze through D. A lot of these are pretty garbage units, so there shouldn't be a lot for me to say about them, but I am a talker. Fortunately, we can wrap the Master Gundam and the remainder of the God Gundam up all in kind of the same analysis. The God Gundam is just a worse version of the Master Gundam, parameters-wise. But the Master Gundam is locked behind what I would say is probably the second most difficult sequence of, like, hidden objectives that you have to complete. They're not that hard relative to any secret you need to do in these games, but just the secrets in R are not that complex. Aside from complexity, there is also just a lot, and not that complexity is necessarily enough on its own, like, oh no, it's hard, that doesn't mean it's as efficient. Like, that's not the point. It is that needing to go through extra steps is always going to penalize a character compared to one that you were just handed to for free that is already ready and is, like, you're going to get without any ardor. But in addition to that, not only is there a multitude of steps, which is taking down a unique Devil Gundam that's piloted by Master Asia, and also getting the Shin-Getter's special attacks off of Emperor Gore. That Emperor Gore fight, as I noted with the Shin-Getter entry, is also like a decent cost. It's a lot of money, and you're losing one of the best armor part. You're losing a copy of the best armor part. So, like, there is a real cost for a character that is, like, more here as a meme. He has really good stats in both melee and defense, the two that he wants to have, but, like, it's still just a copy of the God Gundam, but slightly better. Like, we already don't really love that. He's not doing a whole lot. He has the vast majority of his spirits to begin with. I believe only it's his last one that he has to learn. But he's probably going to be at a level when you get him where he's already going to have learned it anyway, which is why, like, I can't remember exactly how that shakes out. He's, like, decent at combat, but he's not doing anything else that anyone else that's decent at combat isn't already doing. Like, there's nothing stand out about him. And again, obviously, Kunsaiki makes him better, but I am not going to give credit to a unit that takes up 2 deployment slots. I would still, as I said last time, would just much prefer having 2 mediocre characters than 1 slightly better than mediocre character. Play with him just so you have an excuse of saying you used the Master Gundam once, but this is not the game for him, unfortunately. And then all of that in minor key for the God Gundam. It's just there's nothing going on for it, right? A 5 move, primarily 1 range unit that also has an attack that it can't use because it will transform before it gets to it. Just, like, it's nothing. If the other forms of the God Gundam barely were, like, scraping by, that the unupgraded version of it is going to be so much worse. The Gundam X is a little bit odd looking in terms of how I have recorded on this tier list. So we have 4 pilots: Royby, Jared, Witz, and the Jared Tifa combo, but then not any of the rest of the team, which I've not yet done so far. So just what you're going to do is look where those pilots stop happening. So go from Jamil, and then the Gundam X without any pilots next to it is just Jamil down in the order that you already see on the left side of your screen. The reason I have it like this is because you are going to have the Gundam X for basically for the entirety of the game. You get it in scenario 5. So you're going to have access to it when you only have 3 pilots you can switch into it. So you have to assess it kind of on 2 different axes, both when you have this small pool of pilots and then also when the entire team can use it. And because Jared can use it early, that does pull my ranking of Jared a little bit more forward, simply by the fact that he's more likely to have more levels, and an invested character is always going to be more valuable than an uninvested character. Or I guess not always, but in pretty much every case, you're going to want invested characters more. I do think Royby is the best choice for a pilot here. Switch him and Jared with the Leopard, which coincidentally is also where Jared would want to be anyway. It's just that Royby has decent melee, and the Gundam X already also has decent melee and a decent use case for melee, in that its ranged attack is not that large. It's only a 1-to-4 range, and it's just sitting waiting for its satellite lasers for so long. So like it needs something to do. But that's the real problem, right? Is you're expected to wait for 5 turns to be able to get one attack that is a lot of damage. It's admittedly a larger number than most of the other units are going to have, but like you get to do it once and it's not that much larger, right? The satellite cannon you're charging starting with, apologies, sorry. The non-map attack version is only for 4 turns. It still means you're only going to get one probably over the course of a scenario. It's at 4,000 power. The Combattler and the Voltace have 3,700 power. Like, we're only 300 power difference, and I get this attack once when I play through the entire scenario. Not one round, one attack. That's not worth it. It's just not worth it. You need to have... You also have to have, like, morale requirements, so he's gonna need to figure out how to get kills elsewhere. And like I said, he's mostly just stuck on, like, teens damage outside of those satellite cannons. And if you're playing efficiently, there's no reason you should be in a scenario for 8 turns, let alone 12 or 10 and 15. Like, you're never going to use these more than once, and there's no way to speed up that charge rate. Or if there is, I and as far as I can see on the internet are unaware of it. So like, save us in the comments, please, because this thing needs help. Like that attack proposes it's supposed to be like one of these snipers, but it doesn't have any follow-up after that. And then it doesn't have any defensive properties. It has 3,700 HP, 85 mobility, and 900 armor. Like, how am I supposed to survive with that? It's just, it's atrocious. You could theoretically be training these pilots. Like, this is maybe the one part where my tier list is a bit flawed in saying that Roy B is better, is the best pilot later. But like, I'm advising putting him in a unit that you probably oughtn't train. I think he still ends up being fine if you just pick him up later when you get access to the better pool of Gundam X units. So like, I think it does still work out. But there's definitely something conflicting about wanting to move him into a unit that you probably actively shouldn't use in order to try and like save a pilot that I rate as second best in a unit that I rate as first. Like, there's... If you say it that way, something looks amiss here, but as far as my 15 playthroughs have said, this system has worked out for me decently well. I've always had a much better time taking the Gundam X off the team than trying to need to babysit it to give it a couple of kills to say that it got some credit, right? Like, D tier is for the units that, in order for them to have their best use case, you need to slow down and you need to just, like, hand them kills on a silver platter. Like, if the rest of your team needs to manipulate the board state such that the X can actually participate, there's something wrong with that unit. It's not functioning well. And I would say roughly the same is extended towards the Leopard. At least as far as the X is concerned, it can actually output damage. The Leopard both has long ranged, but doesn't actually, like, land kills that well. Obviously, the Destroyed is a better version than the unupgraded one, but it is so much so that I think it warrants going ahead of it, despite the fact that there's, like, a 15-chapter difference between the two. At least with the Leopard, it also is given some defensiveness in the form of 1,300 armor, where I've said before that, like, if you have a long-range unit, you need to have it some tankiness because it's going to be a sitting duck. So the fact that the Leopard is actually, like, afforded that benefit is a, like, marked and it is an improvement exactly where we want it to be. Like, a lot of these upgrades so far, as far as I'm concerned with R, give you improvements, sure, but they're also in ways where it's like, I don't care that I got this didn't actually help that much. Where, at least as far as what the Leopard's getting, it is my second preferred choice. My first preference would just be, like, give them the ability to attack post-movement in a way that matters. But that's too much to ask for, I suppose. But as far as the base unit is concerned, it's pretty underwhelming. It suffers from the problem of the, like, bad long-ranged units, which are all bad. but the worst of the worst. In that it also just has 5 movement, so it can't even catch back up particularly well off of being far away and then like moving back in. So maybe that warrants moving Wits to the second position. I don't think he can be in first in 2 different units, right? Like I think that's a betrayal of like fully being misleading about that early game selection. I'm not like thinking about this hard enough. But I do think Wits maybe qualifies as second best for the Leopard just because you get access to a really early Excel, so then you can potentially catch back up. But I would still rather prefer seeing him in the Airmaster because he uses it better. The other claim to fame that the Leopard has, though, is that it can do okay in water. The Leopard Destroy and the S1 booster both have A parameters in water. So, like, why doesn't that make it good in water? And here's the trouble. One of the benefits of water is you being in melee range with an enemy and then moving into water and then pulling them into the water with you. Like you want them to be just out of range so that they are forced to be in melee range with you and go in the water, thus dropping their defense by like 20 to like B or C. So what is that? That's 15 or 30, 10 or 20. Yeah, you're dropping it by a considerable percentage. Whereas if you're using the Leopard, they can just stay out of the water and you can still hit them. Like, you being able to attack from close range and not long range is not necessarily a reason they're going to come into the water. But frequently I have found, because of where you need to position the Leopard, you are either so far away from the enemy that they aren't going to come into the water, they're just going to go after somebody else that's closer. Their pathfinding is not such that they evaluate every single tile as equally as viable. Like, units that don't have an A in water are less likely to go in the water, or won't if they can get to another target. Even if they could get to both of them, if they could get to like both the Leopard and something else in the same number of turns, but the Leopard is tiles-wise closer, they will still pick the other unit over the Leopard because they don't want to go in the water if they're bad at that. So if you're firing out of the water onto land, they still have the benefits of their defensive stats. It's just that you take a little bit less damage. But like, if you're already taking a lot of damage, a little bit less damage doesn't really matter. I have not found that it's saved me a turn of life. One of my gripes with like hearing people analyze these games is talking about like, oh, this does more or this does less. Like, yeah, there's lots of ways to stack extra damage, but if you're already killing the thing dead, or if it's already lethal in 2 turns, what does it matter that it's a little bit less lethal but still in 2 turns? Like 6,000 points of damage over two instances of 6,000 points of damage and 2 instances of 4,000 points of damage still destroy something with 8,000 HP. And that's how I feel about the Leopards in the water, that you aren't actually gaining enough survivability that you actually get to, you know, survive an extra turn. The Leopard S1 booster also has the grave distinction of removing some stats for out of the water. You get it on scenario 13 and lose it by scenario 18 permanently, because it switches over to the Leopard at the Leopard Destroy at that point. Scenario 13 and scenario 15 are primarily in the water. Scenario 14 has some like canals that you can move through, but outside of those 3, there are no scenarios after that actually really make use of the water much at all. That's at least, hold on, wait. I say that with confidence. Let me consult my notes to make sure that is 100% true. But even if it's not exactly that, it is still so negligible that like I can't remember it. That you are like actively shooting yourself in the foot, removing your properties, like removing like the properties you're going to use the most. Oh yes, of course. 16 and 17 are in the desert. You're not going to, the tundra. You don't want an A in the water. And like, you can switch back to the Leopard, but you also have to like go through, like, what's the point of going through that path to get access to it to then just not be able to use it? The Nadeshko path has more water in it, but you can't take the Leopard there. It has to go on the Ferdan path. And then 18 technically has water in it, but it's behind your defense objective. So like odds are that's not where you're going to go. But again, if you are, you're going to be plopping yourself in the water and you're going to be getting a little extra defensiveness. But for the defense objective, the enemies aren't going to shoot you anyway. They're just going to ignore you and move on to the base tile instead. So it's just not worth it. And then the heavy arms, to me, is just worse than that still. It has a couple extra attacks, which is like fine and cute and fun. But if it can't do damage, I also kind of don't care. It does have an 8 ranged attack, which is like, that's definitely better. Typically these long range, what I've been calling snipers, have 7 ranged. So like having an 8 range is something. That is a unique quality that it has. But it only has 3 points of ammo for it. It's probably one of the best users of ammo parts early on, or like mid-game on. You get it in a mid-game. Because all of its attacks are ammo-based, so like there is no detriment and only upside to adding ammo parts to it. Probably a cartridge and one of the larger magazines. But it also suffers in the same way that the Gundam X does, which is to say it has low movement. It has 6 movement, so not as low. But it has low movement, and that's not really keeping up with the rest of the team when you need to reposition. All of these just like deeply, deeply suffer from the fact that there is no hitting away in this game. I guess also this one suffers too from the fact that you don't have pilots you can use to customize it a little more and give it the spirits that you want. It is a wing unit, so you are also just going to be down a spirit on Troa, because he has to have self-destruct in order to like match the flavor of the show. He has wall to be defensive, which is like theoretically what I said you want to do, but like you probably don't want to spend it on that, because instead you want to be spending your SP on charge and bullseye. He does have 5 more SP than Hero does at base 60, but still that means you're getting off what, like charge bullseye, and that's like all of your SP for the map. And like I say I want to go fast, but like 2 turns is still a little too fast for these usually. And that still means you're maybe going to be attacking 2 at minimum, like probably 4 units at maximum, right? Like you're still going to be so far out of the way because of 6 move that like you're not even going to get to like fully use that bullseye. And you can't put it at risk putting it into the middle of combat or putting it like within range of like a dozen units, because it's so fragile that even if you can like squeeze a wall off too, damage being taken down to a quarter is still going to add up really rapidly when you have really low defensive properties. Speaking of really low defensive properties, for some reason, let's look at the Bolt Gundam. If I was trying to be less objective, and I'm not actually sure I have been, the Bolt Gundam to me is probably the worst unit because it feels way more disappointing than all of the rest of these bad ones. Seeing as it has a like super mode, and seeing as most of the rest of the G Gundam crew is at least half decent. But I don't know what they were thinking with the Bolt Gundam. I would love to watch the designers play this game and see what their plan was for it. It has 5 move by base, the lowest you can have, 6 with the super mode, that's already how that works normally. It has 5,200 HP, which is not a lot. We've seen Gundams that have had more, but it's not so little that I'm like, okay, it's really chintzy fragile. It has 75 mobility, so tell me that's not going to be a tank. And then 1,150 armor, and then 1,200 armor for the super mode. Like, that's not much of anything. And then it doesn't help that Argo just like doesn't have a high defense stat. He does have wall to try and improve this, but again, we're like patching up low stats, right? It feels like his stats were brought low again in order to make wall not that busted on him, rather than like allowing this to be a like incredible defensive profile. But the worst yet, to me at least, if I want to have a unit that's going to be soaking up a lot of hits, I want them also counterattacking in a way that feels like it matters, or just counterattacking at all. I guess you'll always be counterattacking with him, but in this scenario that I've concocted in my head. But his best attack in non super mode is 2 to 4 range with 2,400 power. So if you're going to be a tank in this game, odds are you're going to be in melee range. Like, you're probably going to be orthogonally surrounded, or at least like 3 of those sides are going to be cut off. and he can't use his best attack in that case? Like, what? I thought I was supposed to block with him. That means I need to like face tank things. I can't use my best attack. That's so silly. Who thought this was a good plan? If he had just an ability that reduced damage by like 1/3, like give him the firewall off of the Dendo, and like maybe then we're talking. He's just like 2 different instances short in practically every way of doing something relevant. I do not think it's worth using Argo. I think you are also just actively slowing down to be able to keep him on your team. And why do that? I try not to make comparisons to other video games or tactics games just because they have different parameters and different contexts through which they're going to express themselves, and that's not necessarily going to like carry over 1-to-1 with Super Robot Wars. But I think a comparison is at least apt here to like try and express my frustration. If you have played Fire Emblem before and you've played with an Armor Knight, you'll probably be unsurprised to find that I don't like Armor Knights that much. They're very slow and do not contribute to an efficient clear. That said, the people who do like Armor Knights still recognize that there are a couple of Armor Knights in these Fire Emblem games that, ooh boy, they still don't make the cut, even if you're an Armor Knight enjoyer. And Argo is exactly that type of Armor Knight. He is a defensive unit that even the people who like defensive units do not want. The Artillery Ice Navalises work practically the same way as all of our other snipers. Our primary differences are we are moving around which of our pilots we care about now. I think Ryoko works better for the artillery units because she has a small localized leadership. So like she can shore up the problems that having long range has. It's not going above and beyond. It is solving one of the problems of being at range. But that's also not nothing, right? And because she can localize it and keep it collected around wherever she is going, you have like a small battery of artillery units that can move independent of another group. I definitely think is an improvement, because like, don't forget, this is still D tier, so like anything positive I have to say is still couched in terms of it's good for blank. I have moved, so this also moves Hikaru down to the 3rd position, putting Izumi in 2nd, largely because she has a bullseye, so that's also going to solve the like accuracy issue. But still, we're like long range, 5 move, practically. They have, sorry, not practically, no. They have no post movement options. They don't have a post movement attack. They have to they only have to stay in place. So you are always losing a turn whenever you are moving with them. It's just they're so rough, and it even feels worse than other of these long range snipers, because it's not just that you're losing a deployment slot. You are then also losing a like B grade unit switching into one of these. So to me, you're hurting yourself twice. Not that this is particularly important because they really weren't stand out on the other units, but do note that in artillery form, you also cannot make the combination attacks with the pilots. If you have Ryoko, Izumi, and Hikaru next to each other, they cannot map it, or not map attack, they cannot combination attack. So if they're not the most important thing, but they do also just remove another option from the team. So I've actually recorded the D section once already. I didn't unmute my mic when I first was talking about this. And man, I feel like I hit a wall looking at the Dendo, but we're gonna slug through this. It feels like there's so much to say about it, and all of those things amount to practically nothing. I guess let's first start by describing what like the general principle of how the Dendo works, and then we'll talk about each of the positions and why I've decided to divide this out. The main conceit of the Dendo is that it works a little bit like the Getter in that you're going to be switching forms on it, and those forms are also going to be changing its pilots. But unlike the Getter, where the forms are genuinely like night and day difference, the Dendo sort of just tacks a little bit of extra something on top. And by a little, I mean it like gestured the seasoning near the meal that it was preparing. It did not pour any in. It's like sparkling water that has a hint of a promise of a flavor. And that would be fine if the base form was just like good on its own, but the base form does nothing. It has basically the same defensive profile as Argo, but worse. It has 5,300 HP, 75 mobility, and 1,000 armor. Like, what am I supposed to do with this? This is not blocking anything. But worse, and oh so worse, this has got to be the thing that seals the deal on it being D tier. It has an ability that is just downside. It uses massive AA batteries. The Dendo I think it's just called Dendo batteries, yeah. Where its energy can only be restored by one of its series resuppliers. It can't be resupplied through the Boss Borat, or through the Carrot, or through the resupply command, or through a propellant tank, or through a solar panel. You get the picture. Even though I think I just listed all of them. And it only has 150 energy to start. Every single one of its attacks requires energy. It doesn't gain any extra energy any turn. It's just not doing anything. You gain this in place of the Getter on the Nadeshiko route, and it's just not the same. And you also don't get the support unit right away. You get the first support unit, I think, in like chapter 11 or 12. Hold on, let me check my notes. 12, 11. You get your first support unit for the Dendo in chapter 11. So you are also just without its ability. It's like without any sustainability for it for 5 chapters. Like, why would you ever deploy that? And then at that point, it's going to be behind. And what? You also then have to deploy a support unit that is like okay. And then again, to get what? To get some of the like least impactful effects ever. I have all the different Dendo modes split up because you also don't get to have access to all of the forms from the start. You are going to have those forms added and removed over the course of the game. And like genuinely, I cannot remember when they get added or removed because it's so unimpactful. But I do have the base form listed first because technically it should be getting the credit for all of the different forms. Not that all of them can't transform into all of them. But I at least want to put it first to sort of like demarcate the fact that, you know, it is technically better to have all of the forms than to not have any of them. But it's we're measuring crumbs. The base form does also get a couple of extra attacks later on into the game, and they're like one of them does 5,000 damage. Like, that's really cool, but it does take a third of your energy to do it. You have to be at 130 morale, and I'm already not prone to give this thing kills to get up to that morale level. And you get it late in the game, so like it's just it doesn't. This thing does not function. Its best single attack before that is 2,200 power. Like, what am I supposed to do with this? This thing can't do damage. But in order to talk about these positions, I think I'm just going to read you this like brief summary I have written up for what each of the different forms do. You can find it in my SRWR player unit database in the documentation I have linked on all my R videos. There's like lots of really small minutia we could go over, but it's just not worth it. So let me just read you the differences, and then let that stand in for like why I've put them in the order. You'll see. So also, I guess also apologies that because of how dynamic the poses for the Dendo forms are, they just like got cut very weird with my like small area. So I apologize if it's hard to see. So outside the base form, our first level is the Dragon Flare, which adds 200 additional armor and a couple of weapons. Generally speaking, the weapons that are being added are a 1 range post movement low damage attack, a 2 to 5 or 2 to 6 range medium damage non-post movement ranged attack, and then also a like 3,500 3,700 power 1 range post movement. No, that one usually has a good range, like 3 to 6 or 3 to 7. But it drains all of your energy. So like add that on top of the fact that your energy is also tied to a unique resupplier. you then also have to spend all of it to do your best attacks. And any energy you have less than 100%, you do less damage. It's like, this is so bad. How am I supposed to use this? And then the Dragon Flare, the defensive form, just adds 200 power. Like, that's not anything. That's like practically nothing, especially something that already has only 1,000 armor. If you gave me like 1,800 armor and added 200 armor to it, I would be like, fine, because 2,000 armor is a lot for a unit to have. But like going from 1,000 to 1,200 is not anything. The Unicorn Drill just adds the ability Firewall, and then that same sort of selection of units, but flavored around the Unicorn Drill instead. Firewall is a barrier-based ability that reduces all incoming damage by 1/3. But again, you know, it's already taking a lot of damage. It's already taking a lot of damage. You are technically removing a large chunk of it, but like, you're probably not changing the amount of turns it's dying in, because it's not blocking enough to start. Those percentage reductions really need you to have high stats to make the most out of them, and the Dendo is the opposite of that. I do have the Unicorn Drill positioned second of all of the data parts, also because it's the first one you get access to. So you like probably want to be in that form basically at all times. The reason I say this is next is the Choju Okiba, which once you get it, short of trying to turn this thing into a like face tank, you should probably just always be in the Choju Okiba once you get access to it, because it is like far and away the best non-Phoenix form. It only adds attacks, but it adds a couple more attacks this time. And the most noteworthy of them is a 1-6 and a 1-9 range weapon, neither of which consume all of your energy. They consume 35 and 40 respectively. Neither of them are post movement, of course, but that's like actually doing something. It just is a shame that it takes you about like halfway through the game, like a little bit over halfway through the game, to like actually get access to it. Again, also like tied to a unit that you probably aren't training, because they're usually just a liability if you put them on the battlefield before this. The Viper Whip also does not add any stats. It just adds the ability Illusion Flash on top of the suite of usual attacks. Illusion Flash is one of the chance-based dodge effects, but it flips at 33%, not even at half. And like, maybe that saves you from one attack, but like, do you really want to risk a unit that dies in 3 hits to maybe getting 1/4 to getting a 4th hit, maybe surviving? It's just, these numbers are not dialed up enough. Leo Circle adds 150 base armor and 20 crit to all of the weapons. Like, 20 crit is not nothing, but again, you need these percentage scaling to relate to already really large numbers. Like, if I'm scaling 25% off of a 2,000 damage based weapon, like, oh well, like, who cares? I'm doing 500 extra damage. Maybe, like, I don't. You're probably not changing the like rate at which you're landing kills, and that's also only plus 20 crit. Like, that's not even like something. That's not even something you can like count on, like a plus 40 or a plus 50 to crit. The Gatling Bore adds 150 base power onto weapons. So like this is one of the only two. Yeah, this is one of the only two that actually adds extra damage. And like, that would theoretically be good, and plus 20 extra accuracy. But again, you get it late, and like, it's a gun. This is more just me being like gripey, but it's a gun. Would you like to know what the extra range you get is? It's a 3 to 7 ranged attack instead of the usual 1 to 8. Oh wait, no, that's bigger. Oh, or 1 to 6. Oh, I mean, you don't reach as far, but that's more tiles you're covering. How are we missing so much on all of these effects? The Bullhorn gives 200 base power, and that's it. So it gives 150 base power, and then also 50 base power is like the benefit it's supposed to have, and then the usual suite of attacks. It's just like, none of these forms are worth it. You're better off just benching it. And then say all of that, but edgier for the Night Gear Ogre. I've put them in the same order. It's like, there's probably some slight difference to it just because you get it later, but it's equally as much of a liability, even given the fact that you can start it with like almost a free entire stat block if you go through some hoops. But the fact that you have to go through some hoops to get it is like a markdown. Oh, I guess this is worth noting also. Typically in these games, I will advise people to avoid trying to do like a class by class comparison, as if you only need to pick one of each type. We don't really have classes the same way in Super Robot Wars. But if you were to like go, well, I'm only going to take the best Universal Sentry pilot. But like, if the second best Universal Sentry pilot is better than the first best Nadeshiko pilot, then like, still take the second Universal Sentry pilot. You should still do that. But here is an instance where taking the second best version of a unit actually makes the first best one worse, because whatever form you are in with the Dendo, while you have the Night Gear Ogre, you can't use that form. They can't share. So like, any form that is good is only so good because it can only be used on one of them. I don't know why this unit exists. I don't know why they did it so dirty. There's one more form that we didn't go over yet, which is the fully armored Dendo form. That's just, it's not even around for half a stage. It's definitely more of like a fan service. Like, it's cool you get to play as it, but its parameters do not matter. You are going to be done with it before you probably even get to attack with it. And yet, still below that are 3 more units. There is the Double X. You get it so late into the game, and it still has all of the charge times as the Gundam X. Like, but again, you're going to get to use these once. It admittedly does more damage. Like, you can get up to a 6,000 damage attack if you have a combo attack between the two of them. Like, that'll kill something, but that'll kill one something. And you expect me to like wait around for 9 turns to be able to do that a couple of times? Like, that's not happening. And like I said with the X, like, it does not have enough survivability in any of its defensive profile to be able to be in combat, to like score kills, to get it actually up to the morale to be able to fire the satellite cannon. Maybe if each of the weapons charged independently, I would feel a little bit better, because right, like, you have that, like, the first 3 turns you'd be getting morale anyway, then you have a weapon charged, you can fire that, and then the next turn you can fire another satellite weapon, and then another satellite weapon. But no, as far as I'm aware, it fires all of the charges with that one attack, and all the rest of them are down. There's literally, like, as far as I'm concerned, literally any unit from Afterwar Gundam X is a better choice than the Double X. Please don't feel like you need to wait for high damage. You can do plenty enough damage on your own, just being aggressive and like getting units that push. Second to last, I have the Excellence Diver. I do not rate it very highly, despite the fact that I value water, only because it is diluting your ability to use the rest of the Excellence pool, and the rest of the Excellence pool is half decent if you can't tell from where I ranked it. But the reason having the ability to go in water is valuable is only because you can also then leave the water and still perform regular combat. But the units that are specialized in water are an extra downside, because there is no water stage that is entirely water, even the most water stage when you first fight the Dragonsaurus in scenario 15. The second half of that scenario takes place on land. All of the Dendo enemies show up in the top right corner in the buildings, and like, that's where you're going to end up fighting them, because odds are you're going to, like, the data weapons from the Dendo will pop off of it and then go and like try to charge them as NPCs. Like, you're going to get those enemies stuck up in the building, so like, you're going to need to take the diver out of the water anyway, and it has to be on land. Like, you're just actively hurting yourself. You're forced to in that stage, but like, why would you engage with that beyond that point? It also has its best attack is locked behind a morale limit, and it's also only 1 to 3 post movement, so like, you're not even doing that much with it when it gets to its best form. Like, it doesn't have anything else beyond that. Like, it does damage. It sure hurts if you can hit people with it, but you also, like, I find its usability very awkward. It has a 2 to 6 1600 point damage weapon, and then a 1 range 2300 damage point weapon. So like, you need to get it morale, but it also doesn't have good ways of getting morale. Like, it's gonna have to tag something that has like already been softened up. But a lot of the enemies in those scenarios are flying and not in the water, and all of its weapons now have B in the air. So you're gonna have an even harder time of kill. Like, do you see like the spiral of this thing, just like not supporting its own play pattern? Yeah, as soon as you can transfer out of the diver, I strongly recommend it. If you really wanted to, just to prove a point, this would be like one of the few times where you could use some of the terrain adjustment parts, but like you're spending part slots that could be dedicated to literally anything else. And last and least is the Jigan. It's a grunt from a real robot show. Like, you can't expect it to perform. It's never going to be better than any main character or main character adjacent unit. It is a good unit for my purposes, insofar as it's a perfect way of being able to assess how units work. If it can, like, here's the most baseline of baselines, so everything else up from that has to be like, here are the improvements. So anything that's less than that is like, oh no. If you have a parameter worse than the Jigan, you are hurting. There's no reason to use this. There's so many other I think there are more Gundam units. There are more Universal Century units than there are pilots. So you're only actively using this because you want to try and style on the game by using the worst unit in the game. And that is going to wrap up all of our standard S through D combat values. We have supports battleships, and I'm not doing that, which I guess that's technically in the combat section, but it is worth them being separate because of how differently this game handles the like two different tasks. If we had a lot of other side objectives, these could be incorporated a little bit more, but there is no reason to do so here. We can knock out the supports pretty quickly. Rather than going through each of these individually, I'm going to talk about, broadly speaking, what I value out of the supports, and you'll see that carried through in the tier list here. So resupplying to me is better than repairing. Resupplying effectively gives another character another turn. It's not as good as Zeal or Awaken, but it may as well be sometimes when a unit has no energy and can't attack. I have found my best turns begin with, or are close to the opening when I am planning what my resupplier is doing early. So if you're going to use one, and I strongly recommend that you do, you should try and plan those early. And then after that, obviously, is repairing then. It could function very similarly, where a unit that couldn't go to combat anymore because it needs to take a hit can't, because it would kill it, that now has been repaired, so now it will live. But that is less useful than giving... That is more reactive than proactive. I also value flying really highly on my support units, because if I can't get to the thing that needs fixing, well, then it doesn't matter that I could have fixed it, because I just didn't get there, right? And because these things are all one range, you like really need to be able to get to where you are going. I end up spending a lot of my movement parts on my support units, just because like you have to get to a unit to be able to do anything. Like there's no long range to fix this problem for us. So despite that, you might be interested to see that I have a on-the-ground unit for the first option, and then my second option is a repairer. But that's because Karat is far and away the best unit in the game. It has both resupply and repair at the same time. It also has two pilots if you needed more of a reason to use it to give like multiple SP pools. But even your best combat units are fighting for the same real estate. At the worst of times, they can knock out one of the actions the other one wanted to do. So like you might lose a turn on them like once every other map. Whereas Karat, once you get it, will always have a job to do every single turn, and no other unit can boast that. Repairers will regularly have jobs to do, resuppliers will regularly have jobs to do, but someone is always going to need one of those two things. And the fact that Karat can do both means he will always have something to do. Like, you can't ask for a better unit than one that will always be relevant. I have the Methus next, largely because you get it so early on that you have time to start feeding free levels into your Gundam pilots, and because new type is such a good skill, and you get some of those levels come pretty early, feeding these pilots levels early is really to your benefit. I do have some of these pilots that show up later listed higher with the Methus, just because anybody like the act of resupplying is already so good that if you want to like be nuanced about it, it doesn't actually matter so much who is doing the job early game as long as someone is. And then you care just more about putting units that have spirits that don't need to participate in combat, right? So like the fact that they have high value in support is also partially because they have vacated the seat of a combat-based unit, you know? And then vice versa. Units that want to actively be in combat regularly probably should not be in your support units regularly. Again, I still value the ability to switch them in and out based on who has a higher or lower level. The sequence isn't as good as repairer, resupplier, damage dealer with the UC because you also only have one repairer and then just combat units. But still engage with that sequence. And like you're competing it very directly against the Aphrodite, but the Aphrodite is on the ground. You get it 2 scenarios later. Like that's not that much of a difference for me to like change my mind there, but you get it. The Aphrodite is on the ground and just has lower move. The Methus has 7 move in its mobile suit form, or mobile armor form. Sorry, like this is also the only unit that transforms that I have in its transformed mode. Like put it in its mobile armor mode and never take it out of it. And that 7 move and flying will carry you to anyone that needs healing. Whereas, hold on, where is she? Oh, also I've been saying the wrong names. I apologize. Not the Aphrodite, the Diana. Whereas the Diana only has 5 move and is locked to the ground, and these terrain penalties are hunkin' rough. So I say this with the Karat also, but for all these grounded units, so Karat, Bosporat, and Diana, they don't have 4 part slots. They have 3 part slots and a hovercraft, or whatever equivalent you want to use to jump them. That is the best possible thing you could do with that part. With that part slot, that's the best possible thing you could do. Like no one else is using that part better. It is just worth your time if that's what you need. But as soon as like once you get the Venus, you have no reason to use the Diana unless you want to do the 5 cycle of Mazinger pilots. I think you only need to do the 3. So once you have the Diana, once you have the Venus, there's no reason to use the Diana anymore. Because you are just like compromising on a part slot. Admittedly, the Venus only has 3 part slots, so it's kind of like one of those was being spent to jump it. But you do also, like, you don't have an infinite amount of those parts to jump things. I believe you actually only have 2 of them in the early games. Those can go on the Karat and the Bosporat, respectively, and then the Venus just has flying herself. And you still get her early enough into the game that she's not getting penalized from being, like, later on. And the fact that she contributes to that Mazinger cycle is very good, and because you get her early, her free EXP is especially helpful on people like Jun and Sayaka, who can get up to Rouse earlier. I think they are overall worse rousers than Rain and Funsaiki, just because Rain and Funsaiki are basically always going to come with it, given when they learn it, like when they learn it in level and how they scale in respect to your pilot averages, where it comes too late on Sayaka and Jun for them to like get it just through their pilot level scaling before you actually get them to join. They both get it at level 24. But if you like are aggressive about getting them EXP through healing, you could probably get it in decently short order. And then we have the 3 resuppliers for the Dendo. To me, they are kind of interchangeable. I practically never use them because I'm never really using the Dendo. So, like, their role with the Dendo batteries doesn't matter as much, and like their combat abilities are so inept that really the only thing you care about them is just like when you get them and the fact that they resupply for you. The Cell Fighter and Cell Booster, respectively, have 7 and 8 move. So, like, high move is good, but they have 25 and 2800 HP. Like, I'm never even potentially trying to risk the idea that they might get, like, finish off a kill in place of resupplying. It's just not worth it. The Cell Booster is a snap-off for the Cell Fighter, so, like, you do get 2 HP pools, but, like, your 2 HP pools together are lower than some character's singular HP pool. So just, like, don't put them in the combat. Don't put them in the combat. And then the Valhalla is, again, basically the same thing, but it snaps off into the Valkyrie, and I do like the Valkyrie decently. The like one goofed up part with it is, though, that only Vega can pilot the Valkyrie. So if you have Susumu or Subaru in the Valhalla, it can't snap off into the Valkyrie. So you do kind of just, like, potentially lose that part sometimes. But they all basically do the same thing, which is to say high movement and then resupplying. And to note, just to note, resupplying does, recognize that resupplying happens not post movement, but it's the same way with the sniping, that you are going to be moving around it, or then you need to, like, take a turn off to move, and then get in position for, like, future actions, which again is, like, why the Carrot is good, because on the turn it's not resupplying, it can move and repair, so it's still contributed to an action that turn. It doesn't actually have to take off. It doesn't have to take a turn off to be able to then resupply in a different position later. Boss Borat is then below them despite getting it earlier, just because it, again, does not fly. So you're going to frequently find that you can't actually get it to people that need to resupply, and you're just sort of, like, bumbling about wasting turns with it. And then you just, like, need to sandbag your team, hold them back to be able to keep them near the Boss Borat in order to be able to, like, keep it resupplying to, like, use it for its energy purposes. Like charging extra EXP with healing really basic amounts of energy. And you're just also never sending this thing to combat. Like, it's mostly one range, and even then it's very pitiful damage. I sort of already covered the Diana with the Venus, but just, like, to reiterate, a 5 movement locked on the ground unit is not winning awards in my book. But like, if I were to put all of these into the tier list proper, none of these are falling below B. Like, being low on supports is being the worst of an elite crowd. Like, I would rather the Diana over a lot of other units, but I would not rather the Diana over a lot of other units if I have every unit on the support section before it. You know? What I will typically say is 3 supports. 1 repairer, 1 resupplier, and 1 of whatever else you think you need. Typically, my third one is Carrot, just to be able to do, do both. But I could also very easily see a format of Carrot and then 2 repairers if you're doing the Mazinger cycle, and Carrot, the Venus, and 1 of the Dendos if you're doing the Dendo cycle. Let's start talking about the battleships in terms of why I actually need a category that is battleships. A, you don't get to select your battleship in the same way you get to select the rest of the units in this game. You are assigned one based on whichever map you are using, sometimes both of them. And they are also heavily associated with which of the 2 route splits you are taking at any given time. So for that reason, I want to try and keep them a little bit separate from the rest of the units, because they're just going to be part of your team in a way that is not the same as literally anything else. And second, R treats them a little bit more like an objective than other games sometimes will. Pretty much in every instance, a battleship is going to be a loss condition. So I want to try and separate them out here, because I think they warrant a very different kind of discussion. You are actively playing with liability, and it's a liability that you don't really have the same capacity to opt into. So with that in mind, let's look at our 6 options. And I say 6 and not 7. The Nadeshko B, while being in the game, is only available during the future scenario and is not relevant for this tier list because you can't get it throughout the whole of the game. My pick for the best battleship is the Nail Argama. The Nail Argama is part of the Gundam line, which goes Fredan, Nail Argama, Rock Hyloom. It comes in Chapter 22, where you have that whole big, massive dump of Gundam pilots. And in so doing, it switches Jamil out of the Fredan into the ability to just use him as a regular pilot. That itself is a bit of an upside, but it's not enough of one to be changing positions, but like it definitely still kind of gets credit. The Nadeshiko that's right behind it is really close, I would say, in terms of quality, and also in terms of availability. So, you know, it's not nothing. But the real benefit that I'm finding out of Nail Argama is the fact that its pilot, Bright, has Excel. He technically learns it at level 12, but by the time you get to chapter 22, you're probably going to have him past level 12 when he gets recruited. At least I've always have. So he basically comes with Excel, and that's exactly what you want on a battleship. That scenario in particular makes him look really good. You can toss basically anyone that doesn't have a massive amount of movement, so like 7 to 8 or more, into the battleship, and then excel him forward, and then excel him forward a second time, and you're basically wherever you need to be on that map. It has by default, I believe, 5. Let me check, make sure. No, 6, even better. 6, which is a number that I've said is not stellar, but in the same way that the Combattler and the Voltace are not getting docked as much for having low movement, that's because they can pretty much always have it on. They can always have Excel on that extra 3 movement, and the same is true here for Bright. He doesn't have a lot else that he wants to do. Battleships are pretty inaccurate in this game, so he doesn't really need to be going into combat, but he can. He works. I typically use my battleships early onto my turns just because they have a pretty dramatic change in accuracy. So if that attack lands, that's definitely going to be a thing you can play around a lot more, rather than being like, well, we need to finish this last enemy off, let's save the battleship's attack for last. Like, you don't want to accidentally end up in a position where you aren't finishing off your last kill that you need to secure, and it's on the battleship's head that you didn't get to do that because its accuracy is poor. So usually start with it, right? But outside of that, Bright doesn't really need to be doing anything else. He doesn't have access to a bullseye, which is definitely a downside. But that also means that he has that SP freed up to be able to use Excel. And Excel is also only 5 SP in this game. So Bright starting with a base of 80 means you pretty much get to cast that for the whole scenario. He does get charge, which also does kind of matter. The battleships typically are not post movement, or if they do, they have a really lame post movement attack, usually some sort of like low power machine guns, which is also true for the Nail Argama. It doesn't have, like, even at its best attack is a 4 to 8 range 2200 power attack, but like that's not something. I would say that's definitely more of an augment here. Maybe I should have put this in the beginning, but I'm not docking the battle capacities, the combat capacities of the battleships so much, just because that's not a thing that you should expect the unit to do, in the same way that I wasn't really like docking the support units on combat that much. That's just like not their job. We need them to survive such that we are not dying to the game over objectives. And then because they can store units, we need them to be able to move those units around. Either we need to move them really far, or we need to be really easy for those units to get access to them. And that's not really something that like applies to this game, so we can like scrap that second condition. So the only thing we really care about is like, can they get the units around really far once we have them inside it. The battleship has the Nail Argama has 9,000 HP and 1050 armor, which 1050 armor is not very good in terms of armor, but the 9k HP helps make up for that. But the reason why I was going here is Bright also has willpower as a spirit, so he has the ability to just like heal himself too. He's pretty self-sustaining, which is definitely what you want. I mean, it doesn't hurt to just like, an option you can definitely play around with is just having a healer either like always babysitting Bright, or just inside the battleship when it's not like pretty much all the time, just like keep one stored in there, and then one of the actions that the battleship can do is deploy a healer, heal it for a turn, and then next turn just move it back into the battleship. I don't think you should store them that way, but it's definitely an option that you have available to you if necessary. But my point is that like, while you can do those for any of the 6 battleships, Bright needs it a lot less because he has willpower early on and he has a large amount of SP, and his SP needs to be dedicated to fewer things. It feels a little bit weird docking. So then our other pilots are Jamil and Yuriko. Jamil just does not have good spirits, and it feels weird a little bit how I phrase this, because it sounds like I'm docking Yuriko for having other spirits that she wants to use, and like that's not true. Like she has SP and we have good ways of spending it, but they're also asymmetric. They're moving perpendicular to the fact that she is also a game over condition, you know? Right? So like I do want those spirits and I do want to use her SP, but I can't deny the fact that I do feel constantly safer when Bright is the battleship, when Bright is piloting the battleship I have, and knowing that I can just willpower off pretty much anything that's going to happen. It's also worth noting that he gets up to 4 levels of leadership, and odds are you're going to have him at level 3 for leadership, or probably thereabouts when you get him at first. So you're getting a massive range of leadership, and that's just not something that Jamil was offering. He's not only does he start with a low amount, but it's also hard to get him to level up just because of how poor the Fredan is. So you do get like a lot of extra aura around it. And if, in fact, you are moving it in the play pattern that I suggested of like loading up all of your 5, 6, and maybe sometimes 7 move units into the battleship, and then dashing it forward 2 sets of 9 spaces, and then deploying everything, you probably are going to have some amount of decent proximity to the Nail Argama, because it can already sort of be in the middle of combat, right? So you don't have to go that far out from it to be able to get to your objectives, because it can just sort of jam itself in the middle of combat. And then you also have the survivability of having a lot of the rest of your allies around it. So if you need to, you can set up some support defenses with it. So just like all around, all of the ways that it wants to like actively be participating in a scenario are contributing towards its design. Its design makes those elements better, and it also is not like invading the space. It's not invading the space that the rest of your units are trying to occupy, but instead bolstering them, which in my mind is kind of what I want out of this, like, for lack of a better phrase, like the king on your board, right? It is a liability, but if you can make use of that liability in a way that does not threaten it very much, and in the same way that I've talked about parts, it's like using resources or using actions or using like time in your turns in ways other units can't or won't. That's a huge benefit. Next, let's hop over to the Nadeshko. Unfortunately, because of how I have these, I did not do this on purpose, but because of how I have these organized, we are going to be jumping back and forth between Gundam and Nadeshko context. So I maybe could talk about them just internal to their series, but I want to do them in order. So I guess enjoy. I'll do my best to like appropriately prep for the elements that we actually need for going back and forth between each scenario. Okay, so as I say that, all 3 of the Nadeshkos work the same way in terms of this one ability, and that's like sort of the defining feature of the Nadeshko in terms of your team comp. It has the gravitational wave emitter, which I've referred to as part of the system called the gravitational wave array, I think is what I was calling it, wherein it has I believe it's 3 or 4, I don't remember, I haven't used these Nadeshko pilots in a while, spaces around the Nadeshko, and this is true for Nadeshko blank, Y Nadeshko, and Nadeshko C. There's 3 or 4 spaces around it, where if any of your Iced Valises are sitting in that, once you pass into player phase, so they're at the end of enemy phase going into player phase, they will have all of their energy restored. I talked about this during the Iced Valis, but it's worth saying again here, just as a reminder, and B, like, the Nadeshko does kind of deserve credit for that, because it is a thing, it is the one that's providing the energy. But it is also more incentivizing you to use a specific pool of units and the Iced Valises based on how their combination attack works, and based on how sort of like scrappy and like this go in go out kind of combat. And the vast majority of those pilots also have support attacks, so you're also sort of like incentivized to keep them clumped together. I'm never fond of when a unit can't be generically applied but requires a more specific team. If it gives you options to use a specific team, I think that is good. But if its best use case requires you to have deployment slots already occupied, I am less a fan of that. So, like, if you are picking the Nadeshko, if you're like, oh, everything else I'm about to say sounds really good, and that is kind of locking you into 5 deployment slots, it doesn't have to be true, but you are getting more out of the units you are using if you're locking in all 5 of those. So you kind of have a squad of 9, which is Nadeshko plus 5 Ice-Ts plus then those 9 free spots. I guess technically you could maybe feel like you could free up free up a spot for resupply because of how potent this ability is. And then that means you're going to try and use the Ice Devaluses like more prominently. The one trouble, and maybe this should have moved the Nadeshko down a position, the first one doesn't really get to use the gravitational wave emitter quite so much because early Ice-Ts only have energy off of their high morale attacks. The custom ones do not, but in the early game, you're not going to have as much like way to push morale. So it's not going to get to use that like plus energy very much. But it's also not the only thing it can do. It has a lot of other qualities to it too, which are to say, at least as far as abilities go, distortion field and energy regen small. So it has a like pseudo gravitational wave emitter for itself. It's like obviously not its whole energy, but I do appreciate the fact that all of the Nadeshko like bigger chunky units, right? The Tetsujin does this and the Alstrom do this. Not that they're that defensive, but they're more defensive than the Ice Devaluses are. They give you distortion field and also energy regen small as a way to sort of like counteract the fact that you're gonna have to spend energy for part of your defensive properties, but then also want to spend energy on your attacks. The gear units probably could have learned a lesson from this, or like the double Zeta could have learned a lesson from this. Definitely a downside that the Nadeshko has is that it has no post movement options. All of them require you to stay in place. It does have a map attack, but I did not find myself using it hardly ever, if maybe at all. It needs 120 morale, and just like the Nail Argama and the Fredan that's going to follow it, it's not that easy to get kills on battleships. You are kind of like intentionally saving a kill for them from another unit, and that means you're slowing down, and if it's using those attacks, you're not moving forward. So yeah, its combat situation is not the best. It does have a way lower defensive profile than the Nail Argama with 7,800 HP and only 900 armor. The distortion field is helping a lot though. As a refresher, if you are using a gravity-based attack and you do 2,500 points of damage or less, you no longer do damage. And if you do more than that, then you do damage fully. But if you're not gravity-based, all of your damage is reduced by a third. So you do want to pump up the defense on the Nadeshko if you're going to use it, just to like get better use out of the distortion field, right? Because it is percentile based, so you want to already be taking a low amount of damage, and this is going to like scoop that down lower. You're going to produce a higher number if you're taking more damage, but it will be more impactful if you already have a higher amount of defense, such that you are going to save your HP a greater deal. But as I said with the Bright review, let's talk about Yurika's spirits. She has the primary thing you want to be using with her is Daunt. She has Daunt really early on, and it's one of the few ways that you have to increase damage universally on any pilot that needs a little extra push. Daunt drops 10 morale, which is pretty consistent across these games, and as far as as far as R is concerned, that is a 5% swing in damage. So she starts with 85 SP and Daunt costs 40, so you get guaranteed 2 shots of Daunt on a boss. It doesn't have to be on a boss, it could be used on anybody, but you probably should be using it on a boss from her initial deployment. So that's then a 10% swing. A 10% swing in these games is worth acknowledging, and she just has a button that's a 10% swing on demand. It's once per map, but it is every map, and that is very good. The downside, though, is, as I said also with Wright, that she doesn't have a lot of other spirits she wants to use other than that, and Daunt is so good that you probably should be using it. But she doesn't have as good of a way to heal herself anyway. She's got Trust, which is a 3,000. I think it's 3,000. Maybe it's 2,000. I don't remember. The game's changed however many thousands it is every time, it feels like. But it is a small amount that can target anybody. So like she doesn't have to just heal herself, but because she has that, it feels like she was not given another part to her kit to sustain. And at level 23, she gets Bless, which is also worthwhile. You could... I tend to think of her blesses as like accidental leftover, like I threw a bless onto a pilot and I thought I was going to get that kill, and I was just shy a couple of points, so we sort of wasted that one, right? Where she has a bless that's left over to shore that up. But by level 23, you get 2 SP per level. That means that she will have gotten 46 more SP, which is also another instance of Daunt. So I would prefer a 15% damage swing than extra money. I would prefer extra money on every kill, but I would prefer to use her to make that 15% extra damage swing, because that's just finishing the boss off faster. You would think that my obsession with trying to get things done fast, and will they get more credit because they show up early, that I would have the Verdan higher, but good gracious, does it not do anything? One of the problems is definitely that Jamil gets spirits that just don't matter for a battleship. He definitely is given spirits assuming that he's going to be a pilot later, which is fair. I think I would... Of him, I would rather a pilot that had spirits that were going to be more relevant for later in the game. Right? Like, if I'm going to get him as a pilot later, I want him to have spirits that do stuff for that then. But for my battleship, I would prefer to have a battleship that has spirits that matter to it early on. So, like, fix this by having... I'm pretty sure that there are, like, 1 or 2 different people that help him pilot it. There's gotta be. Have them as sub-pilots. That would have solved a lot of this. Because, right, like, he's just not bringing a lot of what the battleship needs. He has no Excel. He opens with Focus, Gain, and Smite. You're probably not going to get much beyond that. So, like, he has Flash, Valor, and Zeal. But, like, those don't matter for a battleship, really, at all. He's got no... Like, Flash is a defensive spirit, but it's his latest. And, like, getting him to 25 while staying in the Verdan is, I would say, unlikely. Not impossible, but I would say unlikely. Focus does... The 30% from Focus does not provide him enough accuracy to shore up the accuracy problems of having a battleship, even when he's using his better attacks. Sorry, better attack. There are only 2. They both are plus accuracy. I guess you will probably have 100% hit if you use the anti-aircraft machine guns, which is his weakest, his 1200 power attack. But it's 1200 power. It adds. But the reason I say that is because if I didn't say this already, it adds plus 40 accuracy on the weapon alone. So that 40 plus the focus is 30. All he has to do with formulas is contribute 30% accuracy to get 100. But like, you're not doing damage with that. That's like very much a cleanup kill. Which is a shame also, because if you want to get Lancerow and the Crowda, which, despite the fact I've placed them low on this tier list, but I would say that they are good. This is the reason why they are low on this tier list, is because it's also not even like that competent of a battleship, and you need to get 20 kills off of Jamil while in the Verdan to be able to make that happen. I guess technically you can clean up some once he switches over to the Gundam X during the mission where the flag gets triggered, but he's also going to be like way under-leveled because getting kills in the Verdan is so difficult. Jamil also is a considerably worse pilot to Bright because he also only has 1 level of leadership. He technically gets a second one, but that's at level 43, so you might not see that when he moves over to the regular units, let alone in the battleship. So like the aura of leadership, that's one of like sort of the highlights that the battleship provides. Like the closer to it you are, the safer you are, and thus you get to protect the battleship too. well, that's not really how the Fredan works. You were kind of just supposed to leave it behind, right? That does not feel good. It has all of the downsides of a sniper. It has a 4 to 8 range, non-post movement attack, 6 move, and no way of improving that movement. And is then also a liability on the battlefield. So, in fact, it's getting a lot of credit for being early. You just can't tell because the rest of its parameters are bringing it down so low that if it were the later, like if it was the one that you were getting later, right? Like if it and the Rock-Hai Loom switched places in terms of when you got them in the story, it would be below the Rock-Hai Loom on the tier list. Below where the Rock-Hai Loom is on the tier list now. It has the ability to hover, which doesn't matter, unfortunately. I kind of wanted it to. It would be cool if you got to like make use of that more. I think there's like only 2 or 3 instances where you're actually going to like really utilize that. It could technically matter. You could technically have it move over water or have it move over terrain. That would otherwise impede it, but like it wasn't getting into its destination fast anyway, so it's really not that noticeable. Getting stopped would be incredibly noticeable because you'd be moving an inch. But if you're never getting to the end of the target in the first place, not getting there 2 turns sooner is like whatever. So what? So like that's just like not what you're supposed to do with it. And that's fine. It doesn't have to do that. It is what I want out of a battleship more. So it's kind of just dead weight. It doesn't get put into combat then, so it's not threatened, but it is also a deployment slot that's not otherwise getting used, where the Nadeshko is probably moving along with your units and is like actually contributing to the clear, even if just passively by offering extra energy to pilots. But like that's why you bring a resupplier, so like that counts. Let's now jump back to the Nadeshko side of things. This is still piloted by Eureka, so I've said my piece about her already. We have all of the same abilities, so those are all still pluses. We have a bit of a pivot in terms of attacks is like a little bit the trouble here. So the basic Nadeshko has a pretty underwhelming 1500 power, not post movement 1 to 5 range attack, but it uses rockets to do so. The reason I bring this up is inherently any unit that is exclusively gravity based is going to suffer when they are fighting any Nadeshko units that have the distortion fields if that character isn't going to be a hard carry. And the Battleship, unsurprisingly, is not. So regularly, if you needed to try and clean up a kill, or if like the enemy got past your lines in heavy air quotes, right? The Nadeshko C just can't do anything. It even using its better attack, I'll get to that in a second, but even using its better attack with 3000 power, because Eureka is just not designed around combat, she has 131 ranged damage at base, which is not high, and she doesn't do melee damage, so like that's kind of a problem. Having only gravity weapons, and they need to have a high damage threshold, over 2500 power, to break through distortion fields, means that there's plenty of times where this unit just can't attack in a way that matters. I would care a little bit less about distortion fields if not for the fact that also the like basic grunts, like the first wave on the last couple of scenarios, are primarily populated by Devil-Eyes Devaluses, which have distortion fields. So like that is a thing that you need to account for while this battleship is in play. It also just shows up late. You get the Nadeshko C in scenario 34, which is obviously the latest of the battleships. You're only going to get it for 3 scenarios. So maybe this should be below the Rock-Hai Loom. But I will still put it up here a little bit. I will still give it a little bit more quality in the tier list, only because I think the Nadeshkos are generally better than the Gundams for all of the ways except for moving, except for the Excel. And you don't need Excel nearly as much in the end game. So it's also not gonna be around a lot, which is honestly almost a benefit. We have not hampered the Nadeshko in this way by taking away one of its actions. But speaking of taking away actions, it kind of also only has one attack because it on paper has two. One of those is a map attack that requires 120 power. But if you're already not getting kills with it, you're going to have a harder time getting it to 120 power. Or 120 morale, sorry. Like, do you want to be spending your rouses on that? Probably not. And, like, its odds are Eureka does not have enough kills to be getting the ace badges. So, when the Nadeshko was my primary battleship for a playthrough, I don't think I ever used the map attack off of it. And not because I was like, nah, I shouldn't, I'll just have my units do it. Because I literally couldn't, like, she never got there. It's... in endgame, here, we'll say this. In endgame, the Nadeshko C is exclusively its ability. It has become the dead weight that I just described the Fredan as. Which is, I think, more of a shame because it is coming off of a unit that did actually get to participate even a little bit. This is why I do not rate battleships very highly, is because just like they're all semblance of having agency over the battlefield has been removed from them. But the Rock High Loom shows up at the same time as the Nadeshko C, but it also just doesn't have any abilities to speak of that are like contributing. So we're stuck with a load of very average weapons. It does have a 3,500 power map attack, which is like good if you get to get it off, but it's you know it's going to be bad. It adds no accuracy, though none of the map attacks do. It has 1 ammo, which I guess there's 4 in the 1 ammo club. I did not remember these. I did not remember it or the double Zeta because just the Zeta. Because I never used them, because it's also at 130 morale, and again, you're not getting morale on your battleships. If either of the pilots of them had spirit, then like maybe we're talking, but that's also like acting counter to their spirits being dedicated to survivability, and I think that's still just better. Its post-movement option is also 1 to 3 range, 1600 power. Especially in endgame, that's not doing anything. You're probably gonna be hitting 10s with this. So just like keep it out of combat. It does have 4 part slots, so like it's gonna be safe. That said, I think because the thing that is making it a battleship, the thing that's like making it have this distinction is an ability called Mothership, which is not actually printed on it anywhere. But having that also lets you... It also lets you use any of its consumable parts on people that are around it. I believe it's within 2 or 3 range. It's not just immediately adjacent to it. So you can afford to put some of your leftover defensive parts on the Rock High Loom, and then maybe 2 of them go to some like Chop Ham armors, and then 2 of them go to like a repair kit or like a Mother's Stew. You know, like that's definitely a use. That's good. But they are consumable. You don't get to do that for the whole scenario. And... otherwise, you're doing piddly damage and also don't have any abilities that are keeping you safe or are like making the rest of your team better. You do still have the movement off of Bright. You do still have Excel. But I care about it. I care about it a little bit less in endgame, right? You're gonna have that for 33 through 37, so that's 3, 4, yeah, so 4 scenarios. You probably have your team sorted by that point in like who's going where, when, and how. So as long as your battleship can pick... typically how that's going to work is any battleship, any being, I guess, also just the Nadeshko C. That was stupid wording. The Nadeshko C could also just as easily pick someone up, fly forward, and then have them like launch the next turn, and that be enough, and that do enough to get them close to where they need to be. Because the last missions have so many, like, such a density of waves. There's like, I think there's like 4 different lines before you get to the bosses that you don't need to go, like going far is not as important then as it was, 17 scenarios ago. And last is the Nadeshko Y. It has more actions. It definitely has more attacks. 2 of them require 120 and 140 morale respectively. So like, of all of the attacks you are not performing those attacks the most. It has not lost or gained any abilities, so that's there. You do get it. You do get it around the same time you get the Nail Argama, so you're going to have it for a little bit longer. You do also have it for like 6 scenarios. It upgrades asymmetrically to the Gundam line. You get the Y Nadeshiko in scenario 28, and also only at the end of it. And then, like I said before, the Nadeshiko C becomes the Nadeshiko C in scenario 34. So you don't actually get to keep either of these two. You don't get to keep either of the later battleships for very long. But there's just so little time in between when you have the Nadeshiko, the Y Nadeshiko. I don't know why the letter went the front this time. Between it and the upgrade where you want to use it for anything, it's just like extra liability. For most of those scenarios are not going to be route split, so you're going to have both the Gundam and the Nadeshiko battleships on the battlefield at the same time. So if you want a battleship, you already have one, and you have one that has Excel, so like it's doing that battleship function. You could still use it because you're like have Ice Tavalises maybe. It's not actually it doesn't add anything to any of your ability to take actions at the time period when you have access to it. So it just can't rate that highly. Okay. I know I said I'm not doing that, but like I'll still tell you where the units go, kind of. I have made my peace already with the pilots, so we're not going to discuss pilots really at all. Just like go back and listen to what I had to say about all of the Afterwar Gundam X pilots to figure out who should be going in here. But just, I guess, the one thing I will say is whoever is in the primary unit, so the Airmaster, the Airmaster Burst, the Double X, and the Leopard Destroy are going to be the pilot that is bringing their stats to the overall unit, and whoever is in the G Falcon is only going to be bringing their spirits to things. So just like make sure you have people piloting the right robot so that you don't mess up the stat configuration. They're roughly in the order that you see them already in the tier list. The Airmaster is above the Double X and the Leopard. I do have the Double X a little bit ahead of the Leopard. We'll talk about that in a second, but let's start with the Airmaster. It gets access to the highest base movement in the game, which is 11, plus then the 3 off of Excel, so you're going to be working with 14. You're getting wherever you need to be as soon as you need to be there. These combined forms are allowed to have 3 parts. I don't know why the G Gundam series did not get that memo, but that's also good. And you're also like improving the amount of attacks that you have. You have 4 post movements: 1 to 3, 2 to 4, 1 to 5, and 1 to 5. And your 2 upper level ones, your 2 1 to 5s, are 2100 and 2500 power respectively. So like you can get a lot done with the Airmaster Burst. It's a little awkward because putting the G Falcon on does make you more energy focused, and odds are you are going to have ammo parts. If you are going to have ammo or energy parts on the Airmaster Burst, you're going to have ammo parts, and you don't have as much ammo based weaponry now. But you probably aren't going to have, at this point, you're probably going to have mobility based parts to keep you safe to begin with. Your mobility is also like good at base. It's 110 at base, so you're working up to what, 165? Yeah, 165 when fully upgraded. So you can pretty competently avoid most everything going on, and you have that safety of that extra HP pool with the G Falcon snapped onto you. I think the only other thing that's worth saying, and this will be true for all 3 of them, so if I don't say it for the other 2, hear these words echo in your mind for the Double X and the Leopard Destroy as well. It has to have less it has to get less credit because it's taking up 2 deployment slots to use this. So because the G unit is in C and the Airmaster Burst is in A, in my head, I have averaged this out to B, which I think makes sense. Like roughly in the, probably not actually in the middle of B. I would say it's probably, let's stick it like roughly in the middle of B. It has to lose some credit because the G Falcon is so much later, and a lot of the early B is just before you have access to the G Falcon, so I don't think you can go above that. It is mechanically better than them, but you're getting it later, and you're also losing a deployment slot for it. So, yeah, I think like rough middle of B, maybe like after the G Gundam pilots. I am going to echo what I wrote in the Super Robot Wars R player unit database document that I have linked in the description here for the XX, that putting the G Falcon on it is, think of it more like a compliment or a bonus rather than a major game plan for it. You are losing the ability to make the combination attack with the X/GX divider, and instead you're gaining a 1 to 5 range post movement attack of 2500 power. The XX, both the X and the XX, welcome that greatly, but that's kind of all it is doing. You do get one more move, that's good, but that's kind of it. You're still hampered with your 3 best attacks all being on cooldown charges, them all being linked to the same cooldown. The turn count is 3 to 4 still. I definitely started recording this remembering in my head that the G Falcon decreased the cooldown by 1 turn each. It does not do that. So no, its upper end still kind of honks. I guess the extra movement is better. Like, obviously it's better, but like of the stats you want, that's like one of the ones we wanted the most on the XX, so that it can catch back up to the rest of the squad and reposition after it's fired one of its big guns. But like, it's still not doing much. The G Falcon has added to the XX what it should have had from the start. So it's now just fine. It's not going above and beyond. For that reason, and because it's taking up 2 deployment slots, this is going to go, like, let's put it right after the G Falcon. Yeah, that seems fine. Right? It's not D. You can get things killed with it, and you now have, like, a somewhat consistent way of doing that. Like, the only thing that's appropriate to call that is C tier. And then your, like, upper range extra damage cannons are not the major game plan. They're just, like, extra. They're also, like, an addendum to it. Yeah, maybe that's the way to describe the Gundam X and the Gundam XX, is people took all of the, like, addendum extra bonus notes and stuck them all together in one unit, and it's just got a lot of elements that are like, that's a compliment to gameplay, that's a compliment to gameplay, that's a compliment to gameplay, but like, you need to have something to complement in your gameplay, and it doesn't. So the G Falcon is like kind of adding that, but it's adding something that, like I said before, it's adding something that should have been there at base. So yeah, that's like the definition of average. But that's better than the Leopard Destroy has anything to say for it, because the attack that the G Falcon is adding is also its best attack, which is not good. As much as I like rag on the XX for having so much long charge time, if you at least give it something consistent to do, those extra charge times get to be real damage later. If you've given the Leopard damage, consistent damage, and that's the best thing it can do now, that's pretty unfortunate. It does get more of all of the regular stats too. Like 7 movement is maybe saving that a little bit. So like what, you get 12 reach between the 7 move and the 5 range for post movement. It is a little bit at odds with its design. I said on the Leopard Destroy that it's probably one of the units that's going to be using ammo parts the best, it and the heavy arms. And that is reflected in the G Destroy by having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 attacks with ammo at 4, 2, 6, 10, 6, 8, 8, which I know is just like me reading off random numbers. But if you can increase that by, what, it's 2 times, so you're getting, what, 8, you're getting 4, 5, 6, 12, 22, 28, plus another 16, 30, 44. You're getting 44 points of ammo with one of its ammo parts. And then all of that is focused in that direction. Like, you're probably going to put a cartridge on it. And then the scattering beam cannon costs you energy. I probably shouldn't rag on it too bad because it only costs you 10 and it's using a resource you weren't otherwise using. But you are also acting asymmetrically to the upgrades you have, or not the upgrades, the parts you've been giving it. So theoretically, spending another resource is good. You want to find a way to spend all of your resources or make use out of them. But I would be a little bit more jazzed about this if it actually, like, did damage. And it just doesn't. So probably not. Especially considering the fact that the Airmaster Burst gets a lot of benefit from having extra movement. It's already what it wanted to do, and it gets to bump that up even further. And the Double X needs post-movement help, and it does get it from the G Falcon. Like, there's probably not a reason to put it on the Leopard Destroy. There's just, not only are there bad reasons, like, there's bad use cases for the Leopard Destroy, there are good use cases for the other options. So, like, that's like all you need to know to be able to move them. It's gotta go below the Leopard Destroy because it's taking up slots. I guess I'll put it right above the Leopard Destroy. It's taking up a deployment slot, but, like, things are already kind of being penalized by being in C and D already. I could also just as easily be convinced that it's after the sequence of Leopards, or, like, maybe after the heavy arms. But I'm going to say it's right in front of the Leopard Destroy because it is an improvement. It's a nominal improvement, but it definitely does exist. If you were already using the Leopard Destroy, would you want to put the G Falcon on it? Yes, absolutely. If you were using other units that the G Falcon could go on, would you still want to put it on the Leopard Destroy? Yes. Would you get to? Probably not. But I could see a turn where you, like, no, because you can't even detach it and move it over. I could see a turn where you maybe move it onto the Leopard Destroy to, like, get it into combat somewhere and then, like, send it back over to somebody else. Right? You could attack with... You could send the G Falcon over to the Leopard, move the Leopard forward using that 1 to 5 range post-movement attack, putting it in place so it can use its 7 ranged attacks the following turn, and then on that following turn, fly the G Falcon back over to the Airmaster or the Double X. But they just need to be in close proximity to it. And the Airmaster is probably going to want to be further into the team. So, like, unlikely, but it is a thing you can do. Whew. Okay. We are finally finished. That was a lot of units. Thank you all for sitting through that. I appreciate it. I hope this was somewhat informative. I think C and D, while being less significant because, you know, we're debating average characters, probably has the most room for flexibility and some, like, no, I think this should go here, jockeying for position. Maybe I misattributed some elements. So if you have any discrepancies, I would love to hear them in the comments. I would love to hear them in the comments. If you think I've misplaced anything. I did see the comment since recording the first one about separating out units, and I hope I made a good enough case in C and D as to why I think separate forms for some characters probably deserve to be in separate positions. Like maybe the Texas Mac and the Pastor King don't, but like I think I made a good case for the God Gundam as to why, or like why I have the Dendo as broken up as I do. But if not, I'm also happy to talk through that a little bit more specifically in the comments too. Hopefully this was informative. Hopefully the next time you go in, if you jump into this game for the first time or for a fifth time, that this has helped sort of center your perspective about these units. But like this is also my first foray both into making an official tier list, quote official, but like official for me, official canon for this channel, tier list, and also a video about this. So I am expecting some of the formatting and some of my ability to make these calls to improve as we do this for future entries in the series. Which is to say that I will gladly do these for future entries in the series. So if you like this kind of thing, don't worry, we will be doing more of it. It might not be as in-depth because most of the future entries are going to be my first playthrough rather than are where I know a lot about it. But I'm happy to continue. I'm happy to continue this kind of content if people are really into it. I know tier lists are really popular, and I think they're good places to generate discussion. So hopefully that's what we'll get out of it. But other than that, I will just say thank you everyone for watching. I know these are pretty long boys. I feel pretty confident saying these are going to be like second screen kind of videos. So I've been happy to keep you company for this last like 2-3 hours, however long this ends up being. And I will look forward to seeing you in whatever you choose to watch next. So yeah, thanks for being here, and take care everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.